radiant master floated in the midst of lightning and stardust, his palms leading streams of ki and spirit, and in this light the very foundation of being is born. A golden glow reveals the world of 21 continents. Stone islands drift in the void, and an ancient palace rises from the energy as a sign of power. Among the 3,000 great Taoists and countless clans scattered across the lands, the masters converge in radiance, and only the northern Zheng clan has stood unbroken for thousands of years. Under a clear sky, the statue of the Zheng clan master stands tall, its stone face illuminated by light, and its majesty seems to be frozen in its silent posture. A crowd gathers at the bottom, and the hum of voices rises, people shouting for the fourth step, throwing words after the young man like a heavy echo of expectation. The young man rushes forward through the ordeal, the energy bursting around him, but the effort is not working, and he feels the limit of his stride. A stern mentor announces the third stage of the flow of ki, and the young man freezes at the stone, accepting the truth that his power has not reached the height to which he aspired. The crowd is buzzing as they watch the young man's ordeal, their voices mingling in a heavy clamor. And in the hubbub, you can hear ridicule and reproach. From the height of the cliff that rose into the sky and disappeared into the clouds, the four mentors watched the scene below without moving, noting the rare tenacity of the young man and the concentration with which he passed the test. With a barely perceptible smile, one of them drew out his name almost in a whisper, as if tasting it and trying to grasp the hidden depth of power that had not yet fully revealed itself. Picking up on her thought, the other gently continued, clarifying the young man's level, and there was a cold mockery in her voice, as if such a small step did not deserve even a brief attention. The female masters were quietly discussing the young man, one of them stating that his parents were long gone and probably dead, wondering how he ended up in the clan. The master with long ashen hair said thoughtfully that the Xiao family could have sent him away, and there was a chill in her voice as she classified the guy as an outcast to the world. The first elder of the Zhang clan, Yu Biyun, said with a slight grin that finding the young man was like looking for a needle in a haystack, but fate had brought him to them. Master, who was the youngest of the sisters, noticed in a low voice that this guy was the very person that Grandmaster Su's prophecy had mentioned. The third elder sat on the edge of the cliff, swaying her legs nonchalantly, and noted with warm joy that he had finally appeared. She turned to her sister and said with barely perceptible concern that if the wards were triggered, no one would be able to stop them, and the young man might be exhausted to death. The elder calmly said that the master was not wrong, and this was his last prophecy, and once the person was found, there was no reason for them to let him go. The young lady ordered the defense system to be activated, and the other three responded in unison that they were ready to obey the order. The four figures rose up, arms outstretched toward the sky, and multicolored streams of power shot out from their palms, merging into a swirling vortex above them. The vortex opened over the statue like a gate, and purple light softly illuminated the stone face in the space around the young man. He looked up at the sky and decided that the lightning was so huge that a single touch would turn him into charred dust. The next moment, lightning struck him squarely in the forehead, between the eyes, and the suddenness of the impact filled him with horror. The currents of power didn't weaken and passed through his entire body, piercing his chest through his defenses, as if the energy was searching for a path inside him. Still at the epicenter of the force rays, the junior disciple instinctively placed his hand on his heart to check if his body was able to handle what had happened. The young man fell to his knees in front of the statue, his body frozen in pain, and his mouth twisted in a scream of horror and despair. The faces of the crowd changed, the taunts faded and gave way to fear, and the eyes turned to the elder with a silent question about the safety of the boy's life. The elder calmly explained that even the strongest masters rarely came out unscathed from the defense, and even more so a youth of only the third stage. The torment suddenly ended, and contrary to expectations, the young man remained alive and unharmed, only confused trying to comprehend what had happened. The crowd decided in fear that the survivor couldn't possibly be a human, and ran away screaming, as if from an encounter with something otherworldly. The boy stood dumbfounded and didn't understand why those who had laughed at him earlier were now running away in panic. Watching the young man's agony with interest, third elder Jing Hui quietly noted that there wasn't a scratch on him, and he was indeed the one from the prophecy. The youngest of the sisters, fourth elder, raised a finger and confidently said that this young man would become the mainstay of the clan, and the right of mentoring should not belong to one. After interrupting with a stern remark about not having a student, Jing He led the way, remarking that it was only natural for him to become her ward in this way. There was tension between the three sisters, and their gazes collided like lightning in the air, filling the space with a heavy force. Deciding not to continue the futile verbal sparring, the fourth elder was the first to charge into the battle, and her kicks split the ground with cracks spreading out all around. Second sister Dan Wuyang entered the fray without further ado, and her movements were restrained but full of determination. Despite her detachment from dialogue, she was demonstrating her right to get such an enviable disciple into her clan by her actions. Her face remained calm and firm, and she was confident that she would be the one to mentor the young man. The fight between the second and fourth was raging fiercely, and neither was going to give up even a fraction of their strength. Jing He watched from the sidelines, knowing that the sisters' strength was great and that their fight could be fatal. At the same time, she felt a hidden satisfaction, thinking that as long as they fought, she would have a chance to benefit. Big sister Yu Biyun stopped the fight, realizing its meaninglessness, and offered to appear in front of the young man with ordinary girls, giving him a choice. She was happy with her idea, because a free choice would make the outcome fair and save them from unnecessary losses. The two sisters supported the proposal and agreed that it was reasonable, and they would not have to solve everything by force. 3 pairs of eyes were fixed on the other sister, waiting for her decision, and there was a quiet tension in the air. Dan Wuyang briefly agreed and charged into the sky, disappearing in an instant, as if she had been lost in a flood of power. The Jin clan junior student dormitory was calm, and the quiet night gently enveloped its corridors and walls. The youth's athletic body, immersed in the warm water, gradually relaxed after the ordeal of the day. His peace of mind was disturbed by the memory of the elder, his words that the defense system had failed, and that the student's survival was only a lucky coincidence. The young man cursed with obvious annoyance, not wanting to think back to what had happened earlier in the day. With growing discontent, he asked why the system had gone off at the exact moment he entered the testing ground. Memories of bad luck, missing parents, and a fiancée who'd broken off their engagement and left him all alone popped up in his mind. He was disappointed in everything around him and in himself, because his body couldn't store spiritual energy, and he was stuck at the 3rd stage. When he got out of the water, he put on a robe and looked at the ring, hoping that it would one day bring him strength and good luck. However, the ring did not live up to expectations, and in his mind, he already called it a useless trinket. After removing the ring, he saw notifications that he would be moved to another world, as his soul is alien to it, and his power develops in the opposite way. The young man didn't fully understand what was happening and froze, looking at the ring as if trying to find answers in it. When the message that the cursed cultivation effect was completed appeared, he was already shouting in incomprehension of what was happening around him. When he came to his senses, he realized that all this time his growth was held back by the system itself and the features of its work. Disillusioned with the path of accumulating power, he sank to the floor powerlessly, seeing no other way to change his fate. The door to his room opened a crack, and a bright blue light spilled out from the narrow crack. He lazily opened his eye at the sound and thought it was thieves trying to get into his room. But instead of the thief, a girl of striking beauty, the eldest of the elders, appeared in front of him. Not knowing who she was, he froze, unable to look away, and only watched her approach in silence. The girl approached him and calmly said that he was perfect for testing her new technique. When he came to, he pulled back a little, trying to figure out what kind of technique he was talking about. He tried to remember where he'd seen her and why she'd taken such an interest in him. Shou didn't understand why the stranger had broken in and how she had managed to get into the dorm, suspecting the darkest intentions. Yu Biyun didn't give him any time to think and placed her palm on his chest, confidently closing the distance between them. She was going to cast a mind-weakening spell to make him her disciple, and she directly informed him about it. Despite what he had heard, the young man didn't take any action, and this surprised the first elder visibly. Touching the spot between his eyes, she began the ritual, and her gaze was instantly colored in an unnatural purple light. When he realized the gravity of what was happening, he felt fear, because the energy drawn out could cost him his life, and streams of energy were coming out of his mouth along with a scream. However, contrary to expectations, his strength did not decrease, but on the contrary grew, as evidenced by the appearing notifications. The young man felt a surge of hope as he realized that the damage only strengthened him and brought him new units of spiritual power. Not only he, but also the girl, who had realized what had happened, looked at each other with satisfaction, and their gazes already showed a mutual understanding of the strange power. The girl still sat astride him and continued to draw out energy, watching the reaction with cold interest. He no longer struggled or felt fear, realizing that with a distorted system, The loss of energy only made him stronger. Trying to imagine what benefits this young man's training could bring to her, Yun continued to observe the process. She pulled back, slightly pleased with the result, and beckoned him over, gently noting that he looked unexpectedly cute. Still slightly confused, the young man found himself thinking that this kind of enhancement method seemed quite pleasant to him. Embarrassed, he asked her to repeat the procedure again, hoping to experience the same surge of power. The first elder was in no hurry to answer the request because she noticed the strangeness of what was happening and began to doubt the correctness of the spell. Xiao Xiao wasted no time in reaching out to kiss her and closed his eyes, completely immersed in the feeling of a special moment. The elder paused for a moment, noting that the disciple looked quite attractive despite his position. The relaxed guy was a little confused by the situation. His eyes were closed, and time seemed to stand still around him. Cutting off his doubts and nascent feelings, the elder slapped him sharply on the cheek, regaining control of the situation. While he was recovering from the pain, Yun was already thinking that the youth was trying to seize the initiative and turn the power against her. She gave him a slightly embarrassed look, realizing how close she had come to making a mistake and that she might have lost her own energy. As she pondered what had happened, the young man had already regained his senses and was clutching his head, trying to clear his head. The girl was surprised at how quickly she recovered, because with her strength, a student of this level should have lost consciousness for a long time. She cupped his face in her hands, and the gesture caused him great embarrassment, causing his cheeks to instantly flush. After getting close to him and carefully looking into his eyes, Yun tried to catch the slightest changes, but everything remained the same. This time the young man pulled away and increased the distance, then directly asked who she was. But she didn't mind, and with predatory grace she began to close the distance again, as if playing with her prey. There was no room for him to back down, and with his back against the wall, the guy hastily declared that he did not intend to sell himself and would remain a decent person. Trying not to scare him off, the girl introduced herself as a disciple of the first peak of the Jian clan and extended her hand for introduction. As he covered himself, he wondered why he was the one who attracted her attention when there were so many more capable students around. Losing her patience, she slapped him and loudly declared that he was the only beginner with the third step, and therefore it was easy to remember him. The notification about the increase in strength after receiving a blow appeared almost immediately, but this time it did not cause the guy joy. The girl took the opportunity to inform him that the elder of the first peak was concerned about his lag, and therefore it was her duty to help him develop. The guy, who was shamed by his false guesses, once again surprised Yun with his request to hit him again. Disciple Xiao asked his new mentor to hit him for a reason, because he had already realized that any damage brings growth to the body and spirit, and therefore he repeated his strange request with insistence. The realization that any impact only served to strengthen him made Xiao elated and filled him with joy, because for him this was a real miracle and a rare chance to change his own fate. He made the same request to Yun again, this time even more insistently, asking her to finally strike out and stop ignoring such an unusual wish. The girl sat in complete disbelief, not knowing whether this was a madman or a man with very strange tendencies, and could not decide how to respond to this correctly. In the end, the disciple's fussiness made the first elder lose her temper, and she slapped him sharply on the head with a black stockinged foot, not hiding her annoyance. The young man didn't even flinch or try to defend himself, which surprised her greatly because she expected fright or pain, but all she saw was a strange calmness. He hovered for a moment, holding her leg to his face, not realizing the situation until she shouted a sharp demand to let her go immediately. For fear of ruining his own image in front of his mentor, he let go of her leg, although he did so with obvious reluctance. The girl sat at a loss, mentally turning to the great master, believing that the foretold one was clearly not all right, and the situation was getting out of hand. The young man, on the other hand, experienced real happiness, realizing how profitable it is for him to receive blows and how quickly his strength grows thanks to this. A book appeared in the girl's hands and she handed it to Xiao, explaining that it was a secret manual with important knowledge for proper qi cultivation. When the book was in his hands, it seemed to radiate hidden power, promising to reveal the secrets of power in just 3 years of hard practice. He flipped through the pages as his mentor watched him, wondering how to bend him to her will and not hiding his inner impatience. He was thinking out loud that if the flow of qi develops in 3 years, then somewhere there must be a method for the core designed for about 5 years. These words startled the girl because such knowledge was hidden, and both methods were really intended for the foretold one and should not have been known to him in advance. Finally, she suggested that he start practicing and follow the instructions from the manual, watching his reaction with attention. The first step was to meditate for the accumulation of spiritual energy, and the young man did not hesitate to follow this instruction, sitting down in a stable position. Despite his lazy approach and poor concentration, he still received a small boost of 2 points of strength, which surprised even him. The teacher was dissatisfied with this result and hit her student again, demanding more dedication and effort, pointing out the lack of changes in the flow of energy. After taking a deep breath, he concentrated and started practicing again, this time with a much more serious attitude, feeling Yun's stern and attentive gaze on him. However, the notification showed a decrease in strength, which was an unexpected and unpleasant result of his hard work. Frustrated, he realized that excessive effort was only hurting him, finally confirming his strange theory about his own development system. The girl folded her arms and assured him that he shouldn't worry, adding that she was going to help him all night without a break. The long-haired blonde third elder of the Zhang clan, Master Jing Hui, knocked softly on the door, breaking the atmosphere of the room. Her question about Disciple Xiao's presence caught both Master Yun and the youth off guard, causing them to freeze for a moment. Unlike the disciple, Yun immediately understood the situation and hurried to cover his mouth with her hand, not letting him say a word. She motioned for him to keep quiet while he tried to make sense of what was happening and couldn't make sense of her intentions. A voice came from the other side of the door again, announcing that Disciple Xiao was being sought by the senior disciple of the first peak of healers. The voice added that the elder was aware of his problem and had given him a special potion to help him develop. The older sister glared at the door in annoyance, considering what to do next so as not to lose control of the situation and the student. She continued to hold his face with her hand, not allowing him to make a sound, and made a gesture of silence, increasing her demand. Deciding to hide, she quickly disappeared, before strictly ordering him to keep quiet and not give away her presence. A girl in neat boots was already entering the room, and Xiao sat stunned by what was happening, not knowing how to react. The third elder walked in confidently and immediately praised him for his diligence, noting that he was training even at such a late hour. He was already used to the oddities and calmly asked her what she was doing in his room at such a late hour. She was slightly surprised by his calmness, but quickly decided that it was due to his special fate and did not dwell on it. It wasn't her appearance that really bothered him, but the fact that she was already the second guest on this strange night. Holding a yellow pill in her hands, the girl explained that she had brought a remedy that would strengthen the body and help in further training. Her mind was already racing with plans for how he would then become dependent on her and submit to her influence without too much resistance. The girl held out her hand to meet him and said that she was looking forward to their joint training, and he politely thanked her for her concern. As he looked at his new mentor, he thought that he had accidentally attracted the attention of too many strange women, each of whom comes to him at night. Suddenly, Jing-He stood up, and this finally caused Xiao to show obvious tension, causing him to instinctively put his hand out in defense. It turned out that she was going to gently force him to take the pill right in front of her, leaving him no choice. The young man tried to pull away, but the girl held his head firmly, trying to open his mouth and finish his plan. Suddenly, her arm cramped, and she dropped a valuable pill right on the floor, which dramatically changed the course of the situation. The younger student excused himself with ill-concealed joy and asked if the guest was still going to force him to accept her, no matter what. Irritated, the mentor stepped back, easing the pressure a little and assessing what had happened with obvious displeasure. She stared at the pill that had fallen, realizing that it had become dangerous after being exposed and was no longer usable. Realizing that harm was doing him good, Xiao could no longer hide the flash of joy in his eyes and the faint hope. The third elder sat down next to him and gently put her hand on his shoulder, assuring him that nothing terrible had happened and everything could be fixed. To prove her point, she held up a handful of similar pills, showing that she had more than enough of them. She added that accepting them was enough for him to become a disciple of Yao Peak, and it would be a great step for his future. Despite the temptation, he pulled away, because he remembered that Yun was hiding in the closet and didn't want to give her away. The older sister watched from the closet, slightly opening the door and assessing the situation with obvious interest. She knocked softly from inside, signaling her presence at the perfect moment. The blonde, who had almost gotten her way, raised her eyebrows in surprise and asked what was that sound coming from the closet behind him. Propping up the cabinet with his back, Xiao tried hard to convince the third elder that she had imagined the knocking and that there was no one in the cabinet. Regardless of his words, Jing-He had already placed her hand on his shoulder, intending to push him aside and check the cabinet with her own eyes. Throwing the young man away from the closet, the blonde calmly said that there was nothing to be afraid of, because in any case, she would stand up for him. As Xiao stood there in disbelief, unable to imagine what would happen next, Jing-hee had already resolutely reached for the door, intending to open the cabinet. Yubi-Yun was equally stressed when she saw her sister's hand coming through the crack and knew that the discovery was close at hand. Xiao found a way to distract her attention at the last moment, thoughtfully twirling the color-changing pill in his hands and asking her about its properties. The girl was instantly distracted from the cabinet, noticing his intention to swallow the pill, and sharply shouted that she should not take it in any case. However, Xiao Xiao ignored the warning and had already swallowed the power-changing pill, acting without hesitation. Almost immediately, his body lit up with blue light, and notifications said that due to poisoning, his level increased from 3rd to 4th. When he realized what had happened, he felt truly happy, because such a jump in strength from a single pill seemed like an incredible piece of luck to him. Jing-hee watched this growth in amazement, imagining how much stronger it would become if he used the potion properly. Yubi-Yun was also watching from behind the cabinet door, mentally assessing the true potential of the foretold one and its hidden capabilities. Both of the mentors were amazed by his strength, and each of them was already making plans, wanting to get him as a disciple and direct his development along their own path. Their thoughts were interrupted by a new female voice from the street asking if Xiao Nan's room was located here. The sisters recognized the voice at once and knew that the second in command had arrived and that their arrival might complicate matters. Xiao, the only one who did not understand what was happening, turned to the blonde, noticing that someone had come to him again and the situation was getting strange. The girl, realizing that she wasn't the first, shot him an exasperated look, and a tense silence fell between them. After thinking about the possible consequences, Jing-hee quickly made the decision to go into hiding, not wanting to face a new rival. Her eyes fell on the cabinet where Yubi-Yun was already hiding, and she decided that this place would be suitable for a temporary shelter. After warning Xiao to keep quiet and not tell anyone about her visit, she hurriedly hid in the closet, leaving him no choice. He felt uneasy, but he couldn't warn her that she wouldn't be alone inside, so he went to open the door. Once inside, Jing-hee immediately realized that she wasn't alone and awkwardly found herself in the arms of her older sister, feeling embarrassed. Opening the door, Xiao asked the new guest for the 3rd time that evening what had brought her here at such a late hour. The ash-haired girl looked at him carefully, noting his rapid growth in strength and feeling respect for him. Xiao himself, standing on the threshold, wondered if this mentor had also come to teach him, just like the previous ones. He decided to ask directly and asked which of the elders had sent her to him that night. She replied that she had come of her own free will to remind him of tomorrow's distribution, which he had completely forgotten about. An elder with his hair pulled back and a ponytail stood on a stage bathed in light, and a human-sized machine towered behind him. A crowd of disciples had already gathered at the foot of the mountain, and with a stern shout, the elder ordered everyone to maintain silence and order. He said that the clan is divided into 4 pavilions, each of which reflects a different level of strength and skill of mentors. As he continued speaking, he pointed to the mechanism behind him and explained that it corresponded to the 2nd stage of ki flow and would be a test. He explained that after a 15-minute battle, the student would enter the trunk pavilion, the branch pavilion at 30, and the crown pavilion at 1. In conclusion, the elder ordered everyone to prepare because the distribution was going to start soon. Shay stood among the students, exhausted and mentally cursing the girls who had kept him up all night. A tall and handsome student with a smug smile approached him, asking if he was the guy with the 3rd step. Surrounded by 2 companions, Xiandudu mockingly stated that he thought Xiao was the weakest among this year's rookies. Xiao remembered that he was demonstrating the 10th step and assumed that this was a person with the patronage of powerful forces. His thoughts were interrupted by a system alert that indicated that his spiritual power had increased by 5 points due to the insult he had received. Delighted with this discovery, he asked the offender to repeat what he had said, wanting to gain even more strength. Kendudu readily continued, stating that Xiao was unworthy of the academy and was only kept here by his family. The young man did not respond to the taunts, but continued to smile, because each word brought him new units of power. His companions looked at each other in surprise, thinking that something must be wrong with Xiao if he was enjoying being insulted. Another white-robed student chimed in, calmly calling for an end to this pointless exchange. The crowd instantly noticed him, admiring Mei Yong and his noble aura. Xiao was not satisfied, because the praise reduced his strength, and he asked to stop defending, so as not to lose the result achieved. Despite Xiao's request, Mayong continued to talk enthusiastically about how difficult it was for him to reach the third step as a child and how proud he was of the young man's efforts. However, his delight quickly turned to a grin, and he added that Xiao's progress was not guaranteed at all, and in his place, he would have given up hope long ago. The young man was not surprised by the change, only noting how easily the tone of speech changed and how quickly admiration gave way to doubt. The taunt only increased his inner energy, and Xiao's spirit reached a new level, rising to the 8th rank. Putting his hand on Mei's shoulder, he thanked him with sincere warmth for his words, which caused a noticeable bewilderment among those around him. The audience looked at each other, not understanding his calmness, and someone quietly remarked that mocking him was useless, like trying to hit the air. The second nurse watched from a height, noting his self-control and already mentally predicting a significant future for him. This only increased her determination, and her desire to obtain such a disciple became even more insistent. Meanwhile, the elder loudly announced the beginning of the trial, drawing the attention of the entire crowd gathered. He said that Xiao Nan would be the first to leave, and the young man only thought that they had decided to start with the weakest. Sen Do and his friends were already discussing this, mockingly betting on how long the newcomer would last. Xue walked onto the stage, unsheathing his sword in front of the mechanism, thinking with a slight regret that he would like to observe the others first. The ash-haired girl didn't take her eyes off him, wanting to see his true capabilities with her own eyes. Taking a steady stance, the youth charged forward without hesitation, starting his trial. The first swing of his sword sliced diagonally through the opponent's body, leaving a noticeable mark on its surface. The mechanism seemed to react to the attack, and its eyes flashed with a bright red light, revealing something similar to emotion. The retaliatory blow came almost immediately, and a powerful pulse landed in the chest area, causing the youth to lose his balance. The force of the impact sent him flying far back, right into the crowd, causing many to retreat to the sides. The elder who was watching this thought with disappointment that junior disciple Xiao was still too weak. The crowd roared, discussing how little time he had lasted and not hiding their disappointment. However, Xiao stood up, noting that the pain was weaker than expected, and the blow only strengthened his body and internal energy. Holding his hand at the point of impact, he deduced that if he wasn't killed immediately, then each subsequent blow only made him stronger. Taking up his stance again, he readied himself for another attack, knowing that this was the perfect opponent for him to grow up against. Second sister watched in surprise, not believing that after such a blow, he was still ready to continue fighting. With a smile, he raised the weapon again, wanting to test the limits of this mechanism. The crowd froze, both startled and concerned for his fate, as they watched. Another blow from the opponent passed through the subject's body again, causing sharp pain, but not stopping him. Even so, he charged forward again, never losing his tenacity and seemingly not feeling tired. The students around them were talking, surprised because the battle had been going on for almost an hour and showed no signs of ending. The elder noted his tenacity, saying that after each blow he rises again, and the girls watched this with admiration. The youth's clothes were tattered, but his determination remained unwavering and did not weaken for a moment. Another blow he managed to take on the sword, putting it in front of him and holding the onslaught of the enemy. Holding on to the pressure, he realized that he couldn't destroy the mechanism, so he decided to just hold on for as long as possible. His thoughts were interrupted by another blow, a much stronger one, that split his weapon in half, leaving him unprotected. Observers couldn't understand why he was putting so much effort into a simple test and debated whether a recognized genius like Jibo would be able to repeat it. Disdain turned to elation, and the crowd cheered on the young man even after he lost his weapon, and there was genuine enthusiasm in their voices. Elated by the support, he hurled the broken blade at the puppet, putting the last of his strength and determination into the throw. The opponent easily parried the blow, and the sword piece soared up, spinning and losing speed in the air. This did not stop Xiao. He decided to fight without weapons and quickly closed the distance, switching to close combat. The puppet held out its palm, taking the blow as if testing its strength, and held it back without any apparent effort. At that moment, the young man realized that the system helps, but the body is not unlimited, and each attack brings the limit closer. Exhausted, he still noted that the fight was an unusual experience for him, where pain turned into growth and gave a strange satisfaction. The enemy was also damaged, its hull was chipped, and the traces of the battle clearly indicated a tense confrontation. The elder watched in surprise, appreciating the youth's tenacity, and already imagined what his potential would become with proper practice. Suddenly, the puppet made strange noises, and the crowd became alert, trying to figure out if it meant breaking down or completing the test. The roar grew louder, waves of sound rolling across the stage, causing the space to shake and attracting everyone's attention. The elder recognized a rare token. It was the response of the Four Peaks, an event almost forgotten, related to the recognition of an exceptional disciple. The puppet's voice was muffled, announcing that Xiaonan had been assigned to the Crown Pavilion, sealing the outcome of the battle. The crowd erupted in delight because the one who was ridiculed recently was the equal of the strongest students. The elder came up to him, remarked on his rare tenacity, and helped him to his feet, supporting him after the grueling battle. Wanting to help, he channeled energy into it, but this intervention backfired, despite the good intentions. Xiao was indignant inwardly, realizing that he was losing what he had accumulated, and he could barely contain his irritation from interfering. Cautiously stopping the mentor, he asked not to continue, explaining that he would recover on his own and did not need help. Moved, the elder confessed that he had heard of hidden talents appearing late, but this was the first time he had ever seen such a thing. Only now did Xiao look at the crowd, and what he saw made his eyes widen in surprise. The students loudly praised him, and the girls enthusiastically asked for joint training, not hiding their interest. He felt uneasy, not understanding the reason for the attention, deciding that it was better not to stand out and smooth out the impression. Quickly finding an explanation, Xiao said that the puppet was holding back, sensing his weakness, and wasn't fighting at full strength. The girls clarified whether the mechanism really adapts to the level of the enemy, trying to figure it out. However, this did not explain the rare response, and the doubts in the crowd only increased. Shou calmly added that the effect was due to his weakness, and the puppet only showed impartiality. He looked at his mentor for support, hoping that he would confirm his words. The elder played along, saying that it was exactly as the youth said, without revealing the true meaning of the event. The crowd's mood changed again. Admiration gave way to annoyance, and many considered his success an accident. Xiu didn't look embarrassed. He just winked at his mentor, who still didn't understand his deliberate demeanor. With tears in his eyes, the elder saw a rare combination of strength and restraint in him, admiring his character. Qian Dudu stepped forward and invited Xiao to become his follower, trying to regain his status. The young man was confused, not expecting such a turn, and did not immediately understand how to react. After gathering himself, he offered a bet, stating that if Dudu lasted longer in battle, he would accept the offer. Qian's friends were outraged, considering this an impertinence, and demanded respect for their leader, simultaneously devaluing success. Jibo interjected, drawing attention, and his calmness instantly changed the tone of the conversation. Xiao turned to him and offered to participate as well, his confidence only growing stronger. Jibo coldly stated that human cultivators were inferior to other races, and his goal was higher, while Xiao's value to him was negligible. Xiao frowned and chuckled, unimpressed by the loud words of an ordinary student. He repeated the conditions after hearing a confident answer based on Jibo being close to forming a core. The sunset softly lit up the scene, and birds circled in the sky, creating a calm contrast to the recent tension. Qianye lay prostrate, his clothes torn, and his breathing heavy from the fight. Jie walked up to him and poked him playfully with his wand to see if he was still alive, not hiding a slight irony. Inwardly, he wondered how naive it was to expect someone else's body to be able to handle the same thing as his own. The students discussed that the doll didn't adjust and questioned Xiao's explanation. Jibo couldn't stand it any longer and again launched insults, claiming that his success was just luck. These words once again strengthened Xiao, and he felt a surge of spiritual energy, not hiding his inner satisfaction. In the center of the stage, the space began to thicken, filling with a soft blue glow. The flow of energy formed a portal that opened right in front of the students. The mentor led them inside, explaining that the distribution would continue in a new location. With islands floating around and an ancient tree towering in the center, the disciples realized that they had arrived at the abode of the followers. The huge tree radiated a golden light, striking in size and power that could be felt even from a distance. The students conversed, trying to assess the value of what they saw, and did not hide their admiration. Jibo and Chen came forward and asked what the tree had to do with the pavilions. The elder explained that the energy of the peaks is connected to it, and the closer the pavilion is, the stronger the flow of power. Shou asked if the effect of the tree itself would increase, and received the answer that no one had lived there for a long time, although the tree holds the potential of unprecedented power. He was confused when he realized that being close to the tree was not desirable for him, since by the logic of his reverse cultivation, the consequences of being near the source of power could be irreparable. Qianye walked over and mockingly remarked that there was nothing for a weak disciple to do there, and Xiao shouldn't be interested. The elder urged them to come forward by name, preparing students for distribution to the pavilions. The golden leaves suddenly rushed towards Xiao, swirling around him, which left the junior disciple in shock. The elder had expected this, since a disciple recognized by the four peaks should be chosen by the tree. He declared that the leaves were the key to a powerful tree, and now Xiao Nan is recognized as the master of this power. As they watched the leaves slowly swirl around Xiao, the students behind them didn't hide their displeasure, thinking that what was happening was beyond luck and common sense. The master gently roused the young man from his stupor and urged him to accept the key. But Xiao replied with restraint that the tree should have chosen someone more worthy. Despite his attempts to refuse, the elder continued to insist, noting the young man's modesty and emphasizing that the choice had already been made by the tree itself. Turning to the students, the mentor urged them not to be discouraged, reminding them that the tests are held monthly, and those who have not reached the 9th stage will leave the clan by the end of the year. Qian Dudu visibly brightened up, a hint of mockery in his eyes, and he was already imagining junior disciple Xiao losing his seat in disgrace. Xiao tensed up, knowing that his cultivation would become difficult near the source of power, and this fact made him uneasy. Jibo asked his mentor a question with a clear determination in his voice, wondering how their future training would go. The elder began the explanation by saying that the pavilions contain many techniques, and each disciple has the right to choose the path that suits his aspirations. In a restrained tone, he added that this place was full of dangers and warned that recklessness for profit could lead to serious consequences. Xiao also clung to these words because where others see a threat, he saw an opportunity to strengthen himself and accelerate growth. The sky gradually darkened, and the elder announced that the day had come to an end, after which he told the disciples to go to rest. Immersed in lazy cultivation, Zhao lay motionless, turning over in his mind the events of the day that had seemed too intense for him. Gradually, he came to the strange conclusion that everything around him was being arranged according to someone's preconceived plan. The thought made him wary, and he looked around sharply, trying to detect the presence of an observer or a hidden threat. And not for nothing, he was indeed being watched by two familiar masters, watching his every move through the transparent crystal ball. The first and third sisters exchanged glances, wondering if he had noticed the surveillance because of the artifact's failure or because of his unusual sensitivity. Focusing their attention on the ball, they decided that the young man would have to be watched constantly, without missing a single detail. Xiao himself, finding no one, carefully scanned the room again, trying to make sure that he hadn't missed anything important. Tired, he rubbed a hand across his face, thinking that too much tension might be playing tricks on him and making him suspicious. Without wasting any time, he turned to the system, thinking about how the body's resilience was related to bones and spirit, and recalling Jibo's innate advantages. Looking at the growth of his stats, he knew that he had become stronger, but it wasn't enough, and the next test would require much more effort. After concentrating, he decided to explore the residence more deeply to find places where risk would become a source of growth. In the next instant, a cave with circular passages appeared in front of him, known as the Cave of 7 Stars, where each level unlocks new techniques. Then the Great Blade Tower rose up in front of his eyes with 99 floors, revealing the limits of followers' abilities. Then the space changed, and he found himself at a cloud lake that beckoned with calm and hidden power. However, all this did not make him happy, because such places did not give him what he really needed. Continuing his search, he found a harsh area resembling a volcano, where dangerous winds whipped through the air. The young man's eyes flashed with interest, because such conditions seemed to him ideal for training. Not wanting to waste any time, he decided to take advantage of his insomnia and went to clean up before going out. Meanwhile, the girls watching him were already tired and were about to stop watching. Suddenly, the image changed, and Jinghe noticed the fourth sister next to the young man, hurriedly informing Yubi Yun. The first elder instantly perked up, her eyes hard, and she leaned toward the ball, displeased at the interruption. Sister Mo was calmly drinking wine from a jug, standing waist-deep in the water under the soft light of the night sky. The young man, making his way to the water through the rocks, did not expect to meet anyone there, and for a moment was confused. He froze, startled by her beauty, and a blush appeared on his cheeks that he couldn't hide. The girl only smiled softly, her demeanor remaining calm, as if Xiao's presence was natural to her. Embarrassed, he hastened to explain that he was unaware of her presence and had no ill intention. In response, she silently tossed the pitcher to him, and he barely caught it in time, surprised by her action. With a touch of playfulness, she invited him to take a sip, as if testing his reaction. As he stared at the jar, he wondered why she wasn't bothered by his presence and what was behind that calmness. Finally, he opened the jug and took a few careful sips. The drink was too strong, and the guy exhaled sharply, to which the girl only noticed with a smile that the young man was drinking very well. With a sly twinkle in her eyes, she added that she liked him, watching his reaction. Slowly coming out of the water, she approached him, while Xiao remained where he was, not knowing what to do. Moving closer, she touched his chin, noting his poise and unexpected resilience. Embarrassed by her proximity, the young man awkwardly started talking about the pleasant aroma of the drink, trying to distract himself. As he retreated, he admitted that he was getting drunk fast, and his movements became less confident. To keep him at her side, she quietly remarked that she herself felt weak from the wine. When she lost her balance, it was as if she accidentally fell on top of him, and the guy just hurried to offer her a rest, referring to the fact that it was already late. However, the girl did not back down, continuing to violate his boundaries and ask for warmth. Confident that she would receive a positive reaction, he froze, taking no action, and she took it as a tacit agreement. Smiling inwardly, she was almost certain that she would succeed because she thought that she had already impressed the young man with her beauty and artificial helplessness. The watching sisters did not hide their indignation, considering such behavior unacceptable for the mentor. Suddenly, Xiao raised his hand with the pitcher between them, offering her a drink to keep warm. The girl noted his composure, but pushed the jar away, not wanting to continue in the same spirit. Moving to a safe distance, she sat down across from him and calmly asked what brought Xiao here at such a late hour. Since judging by the clothes he was wearing, he was clearly a freshman student. Embarrassed, he confessed that he was looking for a way to the Flaming Storm prison, but he didn't know where it was. In response, fourth sister began to describe the dangers of this place in detail, warning that with its level, it was extremely risky to go there. All three girls were shocked to hear his intent. Even those watching through the orb didn't expect this. After receiving 3 underestimation notices, Xiao felt his strength increase by 75 points, which was noticeably different from the previous increases when he was insulted by other students. The fourth elder strongly advised him to give up the idea and go back to rest in his room, reminding him that the guy's strength level was too low to visit such places. But the young man did not give in, and wanting to continue the conversation, held her hand. Trying to get more information, he suggested that they stay and talk, since the night gave them plenty of time. She was confused, not understanding his intentions, but she noted his strong build and confidence, unusual for his age. Taking a step forward, he spoke enthusiastically about striving for strength and wanting to elevate the clan. After understanding his true motives, she decided that there was something strange about his behavior, but she did not attach any importance to it. Inspired by his tenacity, she still pointed out the direction of the Flaming Storm prison. Junior disciple Zhao shot a quick glance at the fourth elder, trying to see if she was sincere or if she was still playing games with him. Wanting to support him, she patted him lightly on the shoulder and promised with a grin to take care of him, to which he calmly replied that it wouldn't be necessary. Having received the long-awaited direction of the route, the young man took off almost instantly, deciding that the conversation can be left for later, and now it is more important to get to the goal. Sister Mo chuckled softly as she watched him go, her eyes filled with curiosity mixed with the expectation of how this hasty choice would turn out. After all, she had thrown her item after the young man. As Xiao neared the goal, he saw a blue-lit gate where 2 students were carrying out a third one, reproaching him for his recklessness and trying to go further with a small step. The sight of the wounded man stopped Xiao for a moment, and there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes because the consequences looked much more serious than he had expected. However, fear quickly gave way to determination, and he quickened his pace, for pain and danger were exactly what he was aiming for. The students who passed by turned around, not hiding their astonishment as they watched the young man move without hesitation towards where they had barely gotten out of. The stone gate seemed to pull him in, and the world on the other side instantly cut off all sounds of familiar reality. Before him was a restless scene of fire, lightning, and wind, where everything was in constant motion. But instead of horror, he felt relieved, because the power of this place felt like a source of growth, not a threat. From behind, the voices of the older students could be heard offering junior disciple Xiao help, and advising him to return immediately before it was too late. He calmly replied that he felt fine, and just smiled, looking forward to what was ahead of him. The older students looked at each other, not understanding the reason for his enthusiasm, because for them this place was still a source of fear. There was an argument between them, but one girl decided to help anyway and took a step towards the younger student, despite the doubts of the others. She handed him a sphere of energy, explaining that it reacted to dangerous fumes and could serve as a guide in this place. In a calm voice, she added that the yellow color warns of a high threat, and it is worth paying attention to it. Then she activated the technique, applying a protective effect on him, increasing his resistance to poisons and external influences. But for Zhao, this turned out to be a loss of accumulated power, and he felt his stats drop sharply. the spell intended as a help became an obstacle for him, disrupting the usual course of his development. Satisfied with the result, the girl hurried to the exit, leaving him alone with the unexpected weakening. She sighed and tried to make sense of what had happened, deciding to use the sphere as a pointer to the most dangerous areas. As he turned it in his hands, he noticed that it began to change color in a certain direction, indicating the path. Curious, he moved forward, watching the air grow thicker and hotter with each step. The deeper he went, the brighter the sphere shone, and the stronger the blows of wind and heat became, bringing him growth. Following this signal, he found himself in front of a heavy gate with a bright symbol standing out on the surface. Without hesitation, the disciple pushed open the heavy doors and stepped inside, accepting the unknown as part of the journey. The first thing that greeted him was the old man's charred body, which suddenly collapsed in front of him, causing him to retreat. Realizing that it was only a lifeless shell in front of him, the young man moved away and let the body fall calmly. There was a chest in the back of the room, hiding the unknown, and the question arose whether its contents were the cause of death. Raising his hand, he used the opening technique, preparing for any outcome in advance, because the danger no longer scared him. Immediately after opening the chest, a scarlet stream of energy gushed out, filling the space with heat and poisonous fumes. Realizing how much his stats had increased, the cultivator realized that this would be a death trap for an ordinary disciple. When his vision cleared, he saw a bright stone at the bottom of the chest and reached for it without hesitation. At the same time, powerful pulses of energy shot through his body, causing a sharp surge of power and pain. The power grew rapidly, reaching a new stage, and images of future achievements flashed in his mind. But the flow of sensations was abruptly replaced by pain that went through his entire body, causing him to lose his stability. Kneeling down, the young cultivator tried to understand what was happening, still clutching the stone in his hands. The system reported that the body was saturated with energy, and the old sources were beginning to lose their effectiveness. Awareness came quickly, its limit was reached, and further amplification was devastating. He abruptly threw the stone back into the chest and slammed the lid shut, interrupting the flow of impact. As he walked away, the young man pondered, realizing that the source of power simultaneously limited his abilities. Deciding not to linger, the guy headed for the exit, postponing the study of this phenomenon for later. As he was leaving the place, he noticed a vessel that had not been there before, and this caused a slight bewilderment. When he returned, he immediately saw the fourth sister waiting for him with an attentive expression. When the young cultivator asked what the girl was doing here, Sister Mo calmly replied that she was worried and asked him to take off his clothes. Confused, he instinctively covered his face, taking the beauty's words differently from what she meant. The girl, in response to this, irritably explained that we are talking about possible remnants of miasma and not about something else. Awkwardly agreeing, Xiao turned away, allowing himself to be examined, trying not to meet her eyes. The fourth elder was surprised by the lack of damage, because the impact should have left traces, but the guy's body looked intact. This only increased the young man's irritation, because the attention to him seemed excessive and intrusive. Unable to resist, he pushed the girl away, marking the boundaries and wanting to stop what was happening. After quickly getting dressed, the boy abruptly asked who she really was, carefully watching his older sister's reaction. Picking up the jar, Xiao continued his questioning, trying to see if it was related to this item. The girl admitted that she put some of her energy into the pitcher to monitor him and make sure that he was safe. Junior disciple Xiao turned the jar thoughtfully, trying to understand its properties and possible purpose. Her body responded to this movement, as if responding to every action that happened to the thing. Watching this, the young cultivator continued, persistently repeating the questions and checking her condition. The girl struggled to keep her composure, begging for the item to be returned, trying to hide the tension that was building. Shu took his time, continuing to study the reaction, already understanding the relationship between the item and its state. Forced to admit it, Mo lowered herself, explaining that every touch reflected on her. Xiao chuckled, once again asking about her identity, not going to let the situation go. Deciding to buy a moment, the girl gently agreed to reveal the truth, but asked to lean closer, promising to whisper the answer in her ear, and a playful shadow of intent flashed in her eyes. Without suspecting anything, Xiao obediently approached, lowering himself to her level, and in this gesture of trust, curiosity, and caution were mixed, as if he was walking on a fine line. In the next instant, she was on top of him, pinning him to the ground, and the sudden weight made it impossible for him to move, leaving only surprise and quiet tension. Holding him back, the girl asked him with a barely concealed grin if he wanted to continue playing, and there was not only amusement in her voice, but also an echo of suppressed anger. Annoyance bubbled up inside Mo, because an ordinary student didn't have the right to behave so freely, and only the thought of how unusual he was kept her from taking more drastic actions. Picking up her bag, she stood up, determined not to go too far, and there was an odd mixture of condescension and unspoken interest in that decision. As the fourth elder was leaving, she said over her shoulder that classes would start soon, and Xiao should at least rest for a while, leaving behind a slight trace of worry and understatement. As he watched her go, Xiao thought about her strength, and the feeling wasn't fear, but rather curiosity, as if a new mystery had been revealed to him. The crown pavilion towered majestically, its forms seeming to be part of the mountains themselves, and there was an ancient power in this place, pressing down and attracting at the same time. In the morning, the students gathered for cultivation, full of determination and expectations, and only Xiao sat again, tired, with heavy eyelids and absent-minded eyes. A man in strict combat garb appeared in front of them, introducing himself as Mentor Nu, and his presence immediately added gravity and order to the scene. The students greeted him in unison, their voices blending into a single response, and there was a mixture of respect, excitement, and hidden rivalry. In a calm tone, the mentor talked about the cultivator's path, work, and discipline, emphasizing that today they would start with the basics and each word carried weight. His voice suddenly turned sharp when he noticed Xiao napping, and the silence around him seemed to tighten, giving way to tension. He opened his eyes with difficulty, hastily assuring himself that he was paying full attention, even though he was still too tired to concentrate. Student Qian chimed in with a chuckle, noting that luck wouldn't always be on the side of the negligent, and his words were directed more accurately than they appeared. The exasperated mentor raised his voice, saying that Xiao didn't belong in the crown pavilion, and the words were not only displeased, but also challenging. While looking through the list of students, he noted aloud that the spiritual element of Xiao is a tree, and this remark instantly aroused interest among the listeners. Already thinking about the lesson, the mentor reminded that wood is vulnerable to fire, and invited students to come forward with this element, preparing a visual example. There was a murmur in the crowd, sensing a scene brewing, and eyes turned to Xiao with a mixture of expectation, mockery, and hidden curiosity. The students did not stop talking about what was happening, recalling the strength of Mentor Nu, who had reached the 5th core level, and not finding anyone who dared to challenge such a master in their memory. A tall, burly youth strode confidently through the ranks of students, shouldering through the crowd, and loudly declared his readiness to join the battle, not hiding his smug determination. His body looked like it was carved out of stone. Every muscle was taut and agile, and there was a brute strength in his gait that was used to overwhelming any opponent. Master Nu was watching the scene with satisfaction, his gaze shifting to Xiao, and his eyes were filled with anticipation for the lesson that was supposed to put the defiant student in his place. Xiao, who was noticeably smaller than his opponent, tried to persuade his mentor to cancel the match, and his voice sounded not cowardly, but calculated reluctance to waste his strength. The teacher remained adamant. His tone was stern and cold. He made it clear that the lesson would take place anyway, and it was too late to back down. Softening the decision, the mentor added that he would equalize the level of strength of the fighters to make the fight look more honest, and this gesture caused a murmur of approval in the crowd. The opponents took up positions, looking at each other from a distance, and heard the conditions that the battle will be held at the level of the 4th QI stream, without the right to exceed the boundaries. The mentor noted Xiao's rapid growth as he had advanced significantly in such a short time, and this observation only increased his interest in the outcome of the battle. By casting a restrictive spell, he warned that any level increase would instantly stop the duel, and this fixed the rules, leaving no room for tricks. The two boys stood across from each other, staring intently at each other, and the air between them seemed to thicken, foreshadowing a clash that didn't promise to be peaceful. The opponent, shrouded in heat, said that he would not hold back, and although the energy is limited, his body remains his main weapon, hardened by hard training. With a loud shout, he lunged forward, his fist bursting into flames, and the movement was so fast that the crowd involuntarily leaned forward in anticipation of the blow. The watchers were whispering, assessing the danger of an attack, because the fire suppresses the tree, and many were already anticipating a quick outcome, not believing in Xiao's resistance. The mentor felt alarmed, realizing that the blow might be excessive, and for a moment considered intervening to avoid serious consequences. At that moment, the first elder's voice rang out in his mind, telling him to observe without interference, and the order was so clear that the doubts disappeared. As the alarm grew, Xiao stood still, his gaze calm, and even the incoming fist didn't make him change his stance or take a step back. The opponent was confident that Xiao's level would not be an obstacle, and believed that he would not even be able to defend himself because the blow carried a destructive force. A flaming fist sliced through the air, the space between them heated up, and a wave of heat seemed to anticipate the clash that many already expected to end the fight. The blow landed accurately, sending up clouds of smoke, and the opponent was already mentally celebrating the victory, confident that luck would not save him from such a force. Through the smoke, Xiao's calm voice rang out. He noticed that this strike didn't seem to have true firepower, and there was a slight disappointment in his tone. With a barely perceptible grin, he added that the puppet's attacks were much stronger, and these words made the opponent freeze in surprise. The impact only increased Xiaofire's resistance, and he stood unharmed as if nothing had happened, his expression remaining surprisingly indifferent. Mentor Nu couldn't understand what he was seeing, because a tree shouldn't be able to resist fire, and this scene destroyed the usual ideas about the interaction of the elements. Xiaoyi reflected on the futility of fighting, wondering if they really wanted to hurt him, and mentally thanked his unusual system. His opponent was clearly angry, demanding to know why his punch had left no trace, and his confidence was beginning to crack visibly. Xiao Xiao apologized stiffly for his disappointment, and his calmness only increased the tension, as if he was playing with the opponent's feelings. Raising his hand, he shrouded himself in a soft green light and invited the enemy to prepare, making it clear that it was now his turn to attack. In an instant, he took off, the movement so fast that his silhouette disappeared from view, leaving behind only a slight fluctuation in the air. The opponent stared blankly at nothing, not understanding where Xiao had disappeared to, and that moment of confusion was fatal. In the next second, pain shot through him, making him cry out, and his body buckled under the unexpected blow that landed squarely in the center. The blow to his solar plexus knocked the breath out of him, and all the strength he'd hoped for seemed to vanish, leaving him helpless. Xiao watched the result with a slight grin, knowing that strength doesn't always decide the outcome, and his gaze reflected confidence. The next blow hit him in the chest, and he kicked it, putting not only physical strength but also directed energy into the movement. The crowd froze in amazement, not believing what was happening, because the preponderance of forces was not at all what they expected to see. Xiao placed his foot on the fallen opponent's chest, calmly reminding them that the bets were placed incorrectly, and his voice sounded confident. The master couldn't help but think back to his own battles with this disciple, knowing how strong he was, which made what was happening even more amazing. Xiao knew that the key to victory was his resistance to fire, acquired during the night, and this discovery strengthened his confidence. With a slight sneer, he remarked that the master should have chosen another disciple, since the current one was too weak. To explain the situation, the teacher stated that even the unbreakable principles of the elements sometimes allow for rare exceptions, and this is one of those cases. When he finished the lesson, he directed the students to the library where they had to choose techniques, and the interest in the crowd instantly changed the tension. The third elder, who was watching the battle, noted Xiao's strength with admiration, and there was genuine approval in her voice. The first sister admitted that she did not know such techniques, explaining what she saw with the unusual body of the young man, capable of strange transformations. The fourth sister added that despite his strong body, he lacks skills, and this is what will determine his future path. The sisters had unanimously decided that it was at their peak that he would be able to unleash his potential, and each of them had already made their own plans for the disciple. Sister Mo reminded him that the choice should be left to him, and there was a hidden confidence in her own attractiveness in her words. The first elder smiled softly in agreement, and remarked that each of them should earn his decision, not force it. The Sutra Pavilion towered like an ancient temple of knowledge, its floors reaching up into the sky, and the endless steps seemed like a test, as if the building itself was testing everyone's resolve. Raising 3 fingers, the mentor calmly began to list the rules, explaining where to go for beginners, and his voice sounded measured. But behind it, there was a strict demand. He explained that techniques of different levels are collected here, and fate itself leads to the right book. But any attempts to fight for the manuals are strictly prohibited and are punished without delay. When the teacher had finished, he opened the doors, and the silence of the library was revealed to the students, filled with expectation and hidden power, as if space itself was watching them. Once inside, the students froze, startled by the height of the shelves and the countless books, each of which contained someone else's path and efforts. The newcomers looked at each other in disbelief that such a vast treasure trove of knowledge was in front of them, and their eyes were filled with both admiration and confusion. Qianye, driven by greed, pushed past the others and was the first to rush forward, wanting to get the best manuals, not hiding his impatience. Jibo, who walked among the leaders, confidently explained that each floor kept its own techniques, and with cold confidence claimed that it was he who would find the rarest. Xiao, observing this self-confidence, threw after him that you can search as much as you want, but whispering to others is clearly superfluous, and there was a slight mockery in his words. Standing among the shelves that led up to the ceiling, Xiao thought about the scale of knowledge around him, realizing that the words about fate were not an empty warning. Deciding to look for something ancient, he picked up a book at random and was surprised to see a strange title about how to make a mentor fall in love with you, which caused him confusion. At the same time, he felt the presence of someone else again, and the feeling was too obvious to ignore, forcing him to look around. His suspicions were confirmed. The second elder was standing behind him, and her appearance was so quiet that she seemed to have emerged from the shadows. Looking closer, Ji recognized the ash-haired girl who had reminded him of the ordeal, and this unexpected coincidence only served to increase his wariness. He didn't understand the look in her eyes, which were filled with hidden emotions, because outwardly she remained cold and distant, as if she didn't want to join in the conversation. Noticing his attention, the girl directly asked why he was looking, and her voice was even, but there was a subtle insistence in it. Zhao was embarrassed and hurried to explain that he only wanted to say hello, trying not to betray his inner excitement. The girl turned all the way to him and approached him, claiming to know him, and this rapprochement made the atmosphere between them more tense. After inquiring about his purpose, Wu Yang heard that he had come after class to pick out a technique, and there was nothing unusual about this response. Inside, she quickly assessed the situation, knowing that the moment was right, and began to look for a way to pass the technique to him without the others noticing. After taking the book from him, she confidently said that she knew the techniques and could help, and her movements were calm but determined. Glancing at the cover, she read the title, and the moment was far more awkward than expected. Her cheeks flushed because the book's meaning was too direct, and the thought that Xiao might have guessed her identity caused her confusion. As she smoothed her hair, the second elder suddenly found herself enjoying this kind of attention, and this discovery confused her even more. At the same time, Zhao sensed the loss of 15 points of power, and his irritation with the girl suddenly flared up, destroying his previous calm. Without wasting any time, she shoved the blue book at him as if to clear her mind, and the gesture was almost abrupt. Turning away, the girl admitted that she had seen his fight and considered it worthy, so she decided to pass on the manual without going into details. While looking at the book, Xiao noticed the name of the sword codex, and it immediately piqued his interest, replacing his earlier confusion. After opening it, the young man felt a surge of blue energy surging out, and this flow was saturated with power unlike ordinary techniques. The book resembled rare Earth-rank manuals that were rarely found on the lower floors, and its presence here felt strange. The girl confirmed this and strictly asked not to tell anyone, assuring that the illusion would hide the book and he would be able to leave the library safely. Encouraged, Xiao sincerely thanked her, feeling like he had something really valuable in his hands. Reflecting on the discovery, the young man realized that the technique is not simple, and its content clearly exceeds the usual level, hiding something more. He wondered why so many women around him were helping him, and came up with the odd thought that there might be a special attention-grabbing effect on him. Meanwhile, the students discussed Jibo's success, claiming that he got the best books, and even asked to be his student. Jibo himself modestly belittled the find, calling it only the rank of the earth, but immediately declared that he intended to find something even higher. Mentor Nu came up to him, evaluated the book, and noted the rarity of such a find on the lower floors, which aroused respect among the students. Then he turned to Xiao, offering to show her his book, and his eyes were attentive, as if he was already expecting something unusual. He hesitated, unsure of the illusion's reliability, and the doubt made him pause for a moment. Still, the younger student handed the book to his mentor, hiding his inner tension and trying not to betray his fears. After reading the title, the teacher noticed the mundane nature of the choice with a smile, and this reaction confused Xiao. The other students laughed, finding the technique boring, and decided that luck had turned against the recent winner. Receiving strength from the taunts, Xiao calmly remarked that it wasn't the level that mattered, but matching the technique of his path, and there was confidence in his words. The mentor looked at him with unexpected respect, noting that the desire to find use in any manual is commendable. Returning the book, he encouraged the student, saying that perseverance always leads to results if you do not deviate from the chosen path. Xiao took the book back with relief and thanked his mentor, feeling the tension gradually ease. The evening fell imperceptibly, and the full moon lit up the sky, giving the surrounding world a quiet and peaceful depth. As Xiao studied the codex, he realized that it consisted of 9 forms, and the idea of the first one already made him cautiously doubtful. He realized that even with his current physique, he wouldn't get very far, and once again, he mentally thanked his unusual system. Satisfied with his discovery, he relaxed as he flipped through the pages and allowed himself a rare sense of lightness. The first elder, sitting down in front of the ball, decided to check it out because she hadn't watched it all day, and her interest only increased. Seeing him with a book, Yun was surprised that the young man had already started practicing, and her gaze showed genuine interest. When she saw the manual, she froze, startled by what she saw, and her eyes widened, reflecting a mixture of shock and sudden understanding. Continuing to observe through the orb, the first elder coldly noted that the transfer of the rare manual looked too open and resembled a game in which the rules were quietly changed. Her anxiety was growing because such a complex technique could create internal discord in the young man's heart, and so she decided to stop it at all costs before the consequences became irreversible. Having mastered the first form, the guy felt an increase to the 6th stage of the flow, but his body was already beginning to give up, as if it could not keep up with the rapid strengthening of the spirit. As night closed in on the residence, he decided to return to the Firestorm prison, wanting to experience new strength where pain became a source of growth. As he approached the familiar gate, the young cultivator noticed the silence and emptiness around him, and this loneliness seemed to be a blessing, because no one prevented him from taking risks. He didn't know that in the shadows, Yun was watching him, hiding in the distance and carefully watching his every move. Crouching behind a rock, she worried that the young man was once again heading for a place where even experienced students were losing control of their bodies and minds. A muffled voice echoed from the side announcing his movement, and the 3 students followed, quickening their steps toward the blazing passageway. One of them, holding back his anger, said that Xiao should pay for the humiliation inflicted on his brother in the morning's duel. Steadying their resolve, the other 2 rushed after him, and soon the trio was crossing the border of the gate, disappearing into the heat and light. The girl chuckled softly, deciding that against such an opponent, the young man could not resist because the difference in experience was too great. Xiao took out the fire sphere, hoping to use its light again, since it had already led him to the source of power once before. A familiar stone caught his attention, which seemed unusual, and he remembered that he had encountered it before. He hesitated, assessing the risk, and trying to see if his body could withstand the power hidden in this stone, which had brought him both pain and strength 24 hours ago. A rustle behind him made him wary, and the young man wondered who might be following him in such a dangerous space. Not wanting to meet him, he took off, quickening his pace and skirting the rocks deftly, as if dissolving into hot streams. The 2 pursuers were already barely holding on, complaining about the toxic fumes that prevented them from going any deeper. Tai, as their leader, remained resolute, explaining the plan where his friends would attack while he held the target. After activating the technique, it spread its pink wings and soared into the air, rushing after the fugitive. When he landed on the boulder, he tried to find the young man's aura, but he couldn't feel it, which was annoying. Shou had already taken up a position behind his opponent, drawing his sword and preparing to launch a surprise strike. Tai whirled around, shouting angrily, accusing him of being mean and impertinent after his brother's humiliation that morning. The young cultivator easily moved to a nearby rock and checked whether the opponent was related to the one he defeated earlier. The answer was rage, in which words turned into threats that promised immediate retribution. As he leaped up, Tai activated the high stage technique, and his power was overwhelming even from a distance. His face was contorted with tension, and every line expressed a determination to crush the opponent, and his eyes were blazing with anger. Despite his fear, Zhao took the sword thrust, holding the pressure and feeling the weight of someone else's power. He realized that the difference was huge, because the enemy was already close to forming the core, and the battle could end completely unpredictable. The blows came one after another, and Tai asked questions without waiting for an answer, only increasing the pressure and showing a demonstration over the enemy. The strongest impact knocked Xiao away, and the space was lit up with a bright light, like a storm breaking out. When he fell, he gained 42 points of stamina, but he realized that the enemy's strength was far superior to him. Through the pain, the young man admitted that he only regretted that he did not finish off his former rival, who was related to this man. Tai just grinned, not taking the words seriously, and continued to push with his superiority. Zhao maintained his attitude, knowing that as long as he was alive, the fight was still an opportunity to get stronger. The opponent was angry, feeling that he was not taken seriously, and this hurt more than blows because it hit not the body, but the ego. He charged forward again, promising to show his true strength and end the fight with a crushing victory. The claw technique threw the newbie student far away, causing him to hover in the air for a long time. As he gained more stats, Zhao controlled his fall, trying to minimize the damage. He even rejoiced and asked to repeat the attack, seeing in this a way to strengthen himself, completely not afraid of damage. Tai didn't hesitate but charged again, driven by rage and a desire to crush his opponent. The blows added 57 points to his constitution and 48 to his life, strengthening the young man, which he was always very happy about. The attacks followed one after another until the young man found himself face down on the ground under the pressure of the force, defeated as it might seem at first glance. Having reached a new level of physique, he lay motionless, listening to the talk of his demise, which the trio did not disdain. When Yao finally got up, the three guys froze in shock, not believing what they saw, because this was not possible in any of their nightmares. With a smile, the guy asked if Tai was tired, hinting at the weakness of his attacks, which he was so proud of. Tai didn't understand how the man had survived more than 1,000 pounds of blows, so he accepted his friend's help, hoping that it would finally help him deal with the enemy. The small aura technique enveloped Xiao, trying to suppress him and make him unable to resist, shrouding him from head to toe in bonds. The young man broke the shackles effortlessly, gaining new temporary boosts and feeling a surge of energy. With a smile, he thanked her for such help, taking the weakening as a gift. Standing up confidently, he looked around at his opponents, whose legs were trembling, and for the first time felt that fear had changed sides. Filled with energy from the recent blows, Xiao decided to test the sword code, knowing that right now the battle must end, and that it was impossible to delay any longer because the forces required an exit. Raising his hand with his finger extended, he summoned his sword, and a powerful stream of energy swirled around him, filling the space with a pressure that seemed to make the air thicker. There was a confident smile on his tired, scratched face, and a look of determination in his eyes, as if he had already seen the outcome of the battle, despite the weight in his body. The three of them retreated in confusion, not knowing what to expect, trying to keep a safe distance, even though the tension was building even there. As he took a stance, the young man channeled power through his body, and the flow of energy flared brighter, ready to rush forward, obeying his will. Tai, trying to get away from the glow, only had time to think that this technique was superior to anything he had seen before, and his confidence cracked. His eyes opened wider than usual, and all that remained in his mind was the question of how this was possible, since what was happening was beyond his comprehension. It was the last conscious moment before the flow of energy caught up with Tai, and his body couldn't withstand the impact, splitting apart under the pressure of the force. His companions did not look back, but ran away, stumbling and begging in a confused voice for forgiveness, just to get as far away from the source of danger as possible. After expending too much strength, Xiao sank to his knees, stabbing his sword into the ground, and panted as he felt his body tremble from exertion. Sweat trickled down his face, and he anxiously thought about the girl who had handed over the manual, because the strength of the technique was frighteningly high. His body was completely drained, his eyelids were getting heavy, and he knew that just a little more, and he would pass out right there. At that moment, the first elder appeared in front of him, as if appearing out of the void, and gently supported him, not letting him fall. She looked him over carefully, marveling at how quickly he had mastered the first form, something that required years of training and incredible experience. As she held his exhausted body to hers, she realized how close he had come to being killed, and how thin the line between life and death was. While holding him in her arms, Yubi Yun gently said that with such potential, he would be able to master even more difficult techniques, even if he had not already heard her words. The night hid what was happening, and the darkness seemed to swallow up all traces of what had happened, leaving only silence. When Xiao woke up, he stared at the ceiling of his room in surprise, not believing that he was still alive after what he had experienced. Yubi Yun sat next to him, watching him with quiet joy, as if she was convinced of something important to herself. Calmly, she said that without her intervention, he would not have survived, and there was confidence in her voice. Then, raising her voice slightly, she asked him what he was doing in such a dangerous place late at night, watching carefully for his reaction. Confused by her curiosity, the young man replied that he had found a technique and decided to test it, trying to speak convincingly, hiding the truth. The first elder understood the lie, but only mentally noted his caution, appreciating his ability to keep secrets. As she approached, she said that she could offer him something better than his current technique, and there was a hint of mystery in her voice. Xiao, not wanting to go too deep, abruptly pulled back, not accepting the offer without giving out the detailed terms. He frowned and asked, not hiding his wariness, what exactly would be required in return, because help of this level is never selfless, and he understood this all too well. The girl froze for a moment, then slowly pursed her lips, her gaze darkening, and there was a flicker of annoyance that the young man didn't show the expected submission. She continued to say calmly but firmly that he had already chosen the path and did not intend to deviate from it without a good reason, even if the offer sounds tempting. In response, she leaned forward and grabbed his ear, squeezing hard enough to cause pain, and he couldn't help but cry out in surprise. Without loosening her grip, she pulled him toward her, as if to make him look directly into her eyes, and told him that he would still master her technique whether he wanted to or not. Shay gritted his teeth, tried to smile, and clumsily joked that she had a very strange way of convincing students, hoping to lighten the mood a little. However, her reaction only increased, and Yu Bi-yun pulled his ear even harder and reminded him that she was the one who saved his life, and now he had to repay her with kindness for kindness. Losing his patience and feeling the pain becoming unbearable, the young man hurriedly agreed to listen to the terms, knowing that now the argument would only make things worse. The girl released him abruptly and without warning, then tossed him a purple-covered manual that slapped him across the face and fell to his knees. Reasoning that his efforts usually lead him to failure, junior disciple Xiao was worried about his progress, but he couldn't refuse. The first elder only added with a smile that obtaining such a rare manual is an incredibly lucky event for a guy. Xiao pondered, realizing that each new commitment made his situation more difficult, and tried to carefully clarify how long these training sessions would take. The first elder's face darkened again, and she leaned forward abruptly, looming over him as if she were overwhelming him with her very presence, her eyes flashing with displeasure. She said that he would train for 5 consecutive nights, no exceptions, even though she privately reasoned that the guy was just trying to buy time before the sword meeting. She sensed that the pressure was increasing, and he knew that any word against him could lead to an even harsher reaction, so he chose to remain silent. At this moment, the female master's attention was caught by a golden messenger bird that appeared behind her, and she was instantly distracted, focusing on the new signal. She took the message in her hand, frowned at the urgency, and lost no time in getting to her feet abruptly. With a quick glance at Xiao, the lady said that he had a few days to study on his own, after which they would meet in the peach forest at the foot of Earth Passion and continue their training together. With that, she disappeared as abruptly as she had appeared, leaving him alone with the book, the pass, and a growing stream of thoughts that amused his ego. Reflecting on how lucky he was to be surrounded by care and attention from all sides, Xiao imagined how much time he was able to save in this way. While flipping through the manual, the young cultivator thought that even for the first form, he needed at least 2 7th-rank spiritual roots. The thought kept running through his mind that help too often came with conditions, and each new technique could be both a chance and a threat. He sat up opening the book and felt a slight tingle of energy, as if the technique itself was responding to his presence. Bright, almost blinding in the total darkness, the flow of energy captivated the room, causing the boy to go into shock. The energy transformed into a ball, and a girl's silhouette began to form in it, becoming more distinct by the second, radiating a cold power. The girl looked alive, growing larger by the second, her eyes blank and white, and she held a sword in her hands. In the jump, the spirit of the girl shot up from the floor and sharply swung the sword down. The air around him trembled from the force of the blow, and Xiao barely managed to retreat, feeling the cold energy slide at the very chest. Defending, the guy barely kept his balance, not understanding the essence of what was happening, because instead of calm comprehension, he found himself in a fight where every mistake could cost him too much. In the next instant, a spark flashed between his brows, a tiny pocket of scarlet energy burning brighter, as if someone had lit a fire from within, causing the blood in his temples to pound faster. A cry of pain erupted from his chest, filling the room as the system coldly reported that this was a passive comprehension of Starfire, and the level of the ability increased like a reward for torment. Dazed, he sank to the floor, the pinkish light still flickering around him from the open manual, and the room itself seemed to have become cramped with the energy surging through it. Xiao yanked the book shut as if he was afraid the spirit would break out again, his heart pounding and his breath coming in short gasps, leaving a strange mixture of fear and intrigue in the aftermath. Looking at the manual, he tried to figure out if this was part of the training or if he had come across a technique that hid a much more dangerous essence than it seemed at first glance. Fatigue weighed heavily on him, and the student lay down again, analyzing the system, realizing that the sword cannon requires the strength of the body, while the Starfire seeks to penetrate deeper into the very foundation of the spirit. With a small smile, he admitted that he attracted attention not only by her beauty, but also by her knowledge, because each of the girls he met gave him something valuable, as if guiding him along a hidden path. At this time, Mentor Nu appeared in front of the four female masters, their gazes focused and cold as the meeting concerned the future of the disciples and the clan's influence. The first elder was thinking out loud that the trial in the mysterious world was more like a clan competition than training, and her voice was filled with dissatisfaction with the hidden meaning. The second of the sisters, calm and distant, asked quietly about the reason for the transfer. Her gaze remained fixed, as if she already had a premonition of the answer. The mentor bowed his head and explained that the new world was beyond the control of the clans, and due to the presence of many practitioners, it was decided to send representatives of all parties there. Having come to an agreement, the sisters began to discuss candidates. Their voices intertwined, and decisions were born quickly, because each understood the cost of making a mistake in such a choice. Confidently, the master said that the list had already been compiled, and only those who had reached the QE tempering stage were included. His words sounded firm, without a shadow of doubt. The first elder clarified the name of the lead disciple, and the mentor answered without pause, naming Nalan Guoyer as the most gifted among the current newcomers. Repeating the name softly, Yu Biyun thought for a moment, a hint of interest in her voice, as if the choice seemed not only reasonable, but also had hidden consequences. The mentor looked at her more closely, wanting to understand her reaction, and cautiously asked if she approved of the decision because her opinion had weight among all those present. With a stiff nod, she confirmed the selection and announced that a martial arts meeting would be held in a week's time, where the 8 strongest would be eligible to go to the trial. Imagining Xiao's image in her mind, the eldest of the sisters thoughtfully considered the possible outcomes, imagining how his eyes would change when he first saw the one who was once called his fiancé. In the morning, he went out to class, stretched lazily, and exposed his face to the soft rays of the sun, allowing the warmth to dispel the remnants of fatigue that still lingered after the night's events. As he focused his eyes, he noticed a stream of students coming up the high steps ahead, their voices sounding cheerful, and some of them had already turned to invite Xiao to join them. As he caught up with them, he asked with genuine interest about the purpose of the early gathering, and in response, he heard that the elder was gathering everyone for an important announcement regarding the future of the disciples. Teacher Nu towered in front of the crowd, his presence instantly establishing silence, and with a single glance, he made the students stand up straight, ready to listen to every word. His voice was confident and clear as he reported that the 4 clans had discovered a mysterious world at the same time, and in a week's time, the top 8 disciples would be selected to participate in the trial. Seeing Xiao's confusion, the nearby disciples quietly explained that this is part of the grand selection, where clans test the strength of their disciples by sending them to complete missions in dangerous places. The young man quickly grasped the essence, realizing that the test would not only test his own limits, but also see the abilities of the opponents hidden until this moment. Continuing his speech, the mentor added that selected students will represent the clan and compete with the best talents to strengthen the honor of the school and declare its strength in front of others. Xiao Xiao didn't hide his interest as he asked if this world was more dangerous than the familiar cave, and his voice was calm, as if he had already made up his mind to go there. In response, the mentor called the world Hell of the Scarlet Winds, noting that it is full of rare treasures, but it poses a threat far greater than anything that students have encountered before. Hearing this, the crowd roared, many trying to withdraw from participation, shifting the responsibility to their elders, convincing themselves that they should go first. The mentor abruptly interrupted the noise, saying that if no one showed determination, he would choose the 8 strongest ones himself, and then there would be no way to refuse. Unexpectedly for everyone, junior disciple Xiao raised his hand. His decision was instantaneous. After all, danger for him meant an opportunity to grow, and not a reason to retreat. After assessing his level, the mentor was surprised at the rapid progress, because the guy had already reached the 6th level of Kui Flow and warned aloud about the risk, trying to understand whether the young man realized the consequences of his choice. The young cultivator calmly retorted, reminding them that the rules didn't prohibit newcomers from participating, and his words sounded firm, as if he had already accepted his fate. The teacher sighed and replied that he was only trying to protect him because he sees in him a potential that should not be lost because of a rash step. There was a murmur behind them as the students discussed that it would be better if someone like Jibo acted because he was more reliable and wouldn't embarrass the clan by losing. Feeling a surge of power from their words, Zhao purposely increased the tension, realizing that each mocking remark only pushed him forward. With a slight grin, he said that it was even unpleasant to be among such cowardly people, because in a difficult moment, none of them would stand up for the clan. His words hung in the air, and dozens of surprised looks were directed at him. No one expected such audacity from a newbie. The master clasped his hands and thanked Xiao for his sincerity, seeing in his words not only a challenge, but also a rare directness for a student. To the surprise of many, the young man's words sparked a spark of determination in the crowd, and some began to think that they should also try their hand. Xiao Xiao grimaced inwardly, because he had expected otherwise. He had already imagined how he would gain strength from their taunts, but now the mood of the crowd had changed. A tall youth with blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail stepped out of the ranks, his gaze cold, and he quipped that the sixth stage student was too weak. Xiao frowned and directly asked who was standing in front of him, not wanting to leave such words unanswered. He proudly introduced himself, calling out Ling Chu's name and stating that he was half a step away from the next level, Key Mode, his confidence sounding like a challenge. Clenching his fists, Zhao asked if he would get a place in the trial if he defeated such an opponent. His voice was calm, but there was determination in it. Ling Qiu only chuckled, openly mocking the opponent's sword and its chances, not hiding his confidence in his own victory. A week later, the students were facing each other in the arena. The air was tense, and each of them had already taken a step after which there was no turning back. The great beginning clan's training ground was crowded with watchers, the noise of voices merging into a single hum, and there were two thrones on the dais where a girl and a man sat motionless. Some looked at the upcoming fight with delight, waiting for the spectacle, some with anxiety anticipating the outcome, but there were no indifferent people. Tension hovered in the air, as if before a storm. The girl on the throne kept her eyes on Xiao, her eyes calm, but there was something heavy in the depths, as if she saw more in him than the others could see. Images from the distant past came back to her. In one of them, Xiao standing mighty and cold, promising to send her to the abyss, and this memory haunted her. Then there was another episode where Nalan Guor thanked her for her training, for the techniques that made it possible to defeat the strongest, and these words sounded sincere gratitude. Keeping her cool, the girl decided that Xiao should be eliminated, but it should be done in such a way that the clan did not interfere, because any mistake could turn into a repeat of previous failures. The former bride's mentor recalled their recent conversation, where, suppressing her pride, she demanded to renew the engagement, considering it a necessary step for the sake of a common goal. She insisted that before the boy grew stronger, she should return him to the clan, re-establish a connection that might prove crucial in the future. Nalan resisted, unwilling to associate herself with someone she considered insignificant, her voice firm and her gaze filled with cold disdain. Her mentor's response was sharp, reminding her that despite her failures, Xiao was still a genius, and underestimating him could be a fatal mistake. The student sank to her knees under the weight of her words, admitting that she had made a mistake, and for the first time there was a hint of doubt in her voice. She had to accept the order, even though she was seething with indignation, repeating that Xiao had become a stain on her reputation and a mistake that couldn't be ignored. Clenching her fists, she vowed to destroy him with her own hands, determined to erase the past with him so that she would never return to that weakness again. Meanwhile, Xiaoxiu was thinking about the upcoming battle as he left the meeting, assessing his own strength and trying to see if he had enough options against Ling Qiu. Just to be safe, he thought of the Medicine Peak sister, hoping to get something useful from her, even if it was unstable or dangerous. Jinghe was already waiting for him at the door, holding a book in her hands, her eyes focused, as if she knew beforehand that this was where he would come. She wasn't going to delay because the other sisters had already made their moves, and now it was her turn, and she couldn't miss the moment. The student approached quietly and asked who she was expecting, his voice calm but curious. She threw her arms around his neck, not hiding her joy, as if she had been waiting for this meeting for a long time. Her impulse was sincere and unexpected. Confused, he cautiously asked if she was waiting for him here. After all, he had searched for her at Medicine Peak, but couldn't find any trace of her. Carefully removing his hands from around his neck, he placed the third elder in front of him and asked if she needed help, trying to get the conversation back on track. Holding out the book, Jinghe said that she had heard about his battle and wanted to help if he accepted her offer, her voice sounding genuinely willing. Xiao didn't hold back his interest and quickly took the volume, because the previous knowledge had already proved its value, and he was waiting for a new discovery. When he opened the book, he realized that it was the canon of alchemy, and the realization that he could create potions on his own filled him with real joy. The girl watched him with a smile, noting his desire for knowledge and willingness to go forward, despite difficulties and risks. A fire elixir caught his attention, and he urgently asked to be taught how to create this dangerous remedy. She explained that the elixir is filled with poisonous, fiery energy and is used in battle, most often unexpectedly, to deprive the enemy of a chance to defend. Anxiously, the lady warned that using such methods could lead to banishment, as the clan strictly monitors the integrity of battles. Xiao quickly defended himself, saying that he only wanted to understand the methods of protection and expand his knowledge. His words sounded convincing. After a short pause, she agreed, making it a condition that he would come to the alchemy peak every 3 days, and then she would take over his training. The hero calmly agreed to attend the training sessions of another big sister, and there was no hesitation in his voice. But Jing He, with a noticeable annoyance, clarified what exactly he meant by this word. A pang of resentment hit her unexpectedly, and she quickly realized that she was talking about other mentors who had already managed to influence the young man. From this thought, a shadow of displeasure flashed in her eyes. Coming closer, the girl gently but confidently took his chin. Her voice became colder. She warned that at the slightest violation of the conditions, she would take the cannon handed to him. Satisfied with her agreement, she turned and walked away, saying over her shoulder that she would be waiting for him in training, and there was a hint of determination in her step. A week passed, and the students gathered again at the top of the mountain, Master Nu sitting on the throne, calling each one in turn to assess their strength and readiness for the test. There was a lot of chatter in the crowd, students debating among themselves whether Xiao could defeat Ling Chu. Doubts were louder than certainty, and many predicted the outcome in advance. The 4 elders were hiding among the students, listening carefully to the conversations where Xiao was called weak and unworthy, and there was more mockery than common sense in these words. Lin was already standing on the court, his eyes focused, but the opponent didn't appear, and he began to think that the fight would not take place, considering this a sign of weakness. At that moment, the latecomer appeared from above, descending in a swift leap as if he had appeared out of thin air, and his appearance silenced the crowd for a moment. He landed softly in front of Lin, keeping his calm as the other party just grinned, confident that the outcome of the fight was already decided. Straightening up confidently, the young man noticed that lateness is characteristic of those who come on stage at the right moment, and his words sounded light and casual. Lin noted the audacity of his opponent, but aloud only coldly replied that a reasonable person would not come to a fight where the outcome was obvious. Concentrating, he wrapped himself in a dense yellow energy. His voice became firm as he declared that this duel would solidify Xiao's true standing among the disciples. The watching students were amazed as they discussed the source of such power. Many of them had seen such a technique for the first time and did not hide their admiration for Lin's power. Xiao only smiled slightly. He was already used to such threats and felt no fear, his calmness almost defiant against the general tension. Brimming with energy, Lin abruptly charged forward, intending to end the fight with a single powerful punch. There was no doubt about his movement. Xiao unsheathed his sword but remained in place, his stance calm, as if he was waiting for the right moment, not rushing to react to the attack. Their energies collided in the center, and the flash was bright and sharp, as if space itself had shuddered, unable to withstand the force of the collision. The opponent did not doubt his own superiority. He was sure that the opponent's 6th stage would not allow him to withstand such pressure. After surviving the first onslaught, Xiao gently sank to the ground and calmly remarked that if strength was measured in words, his opponent would truly be invincible. His voice firmed as he added that Lin's confidence would inevitably be shaken today, and there was no doubt about it. Lin sensed the change in the opponent's energy and frowned, not understanding where this power that clearly didn't match the stated level came from. As Xiao repelled another attack, he forced him to retreat, and for the first time Ling realized that he was facing an opponent whose capabilities were hidden deeper than they seemed. Watching him move backwards, the young cultivator calmly asked where his previous confidence had gone, and his voice was almost mocking. Breathing heavily, Lin acknowledged the strength of the opponent, but still reminded them of the difference in levels, trying to convince both himself and others that the outcome of the battle was not yet determined. Already openly bored, junior disciple Xiao, who was not being betted on, threw out to the opponent that with such a stream of empty words, it would not be easy for him to find a girl, and there was a cold indifference in his voice. The crowd watching the fight joined in with a low laugh, catching the truth in what was said, because no one had ever dared to say it out loud before, although many people had long thought so. Ling Qiu's words stung, and a heavy shadow of anger appeared on his face, because he had only heard praise before, and now the sudden humiliation was especially painful for him. Summoning an unknown spell, He declared that at first he considered them equal students of the Sword Clan and showed leniency, but now he no longer intends to hold back, and a threat rang in his voice. The young man, on the other hand, remained impassive, as if the words had not reached him at all, and only briefly encouraged his opponent, as if inviting him to act faster and more decisively. The second of the sisters who had been watching the match turned her back to the parade ground, as if she had lost interest, and her gesture looked like a calm confidence in the already decided outcome. She explained that the winner was obvious, because Xiao had mastered the first form of the sword cannon in a matter of days, which meant that the outcome of the battle was no longer in the slightest doubt for her. The first elder only grunted in response, noting that there was nothing special about the cannon itself, and her calmness concealed a much deeper understanding of what was happening. Meanwhile, the opponent was already preparing an attack, preparing to use the great golden doombird technique starting from the first form, and his movements were filled with ostentatious power. The punches came down one after another, accompanied by loud names that sounded majestic, and could have impressed any less confident opponent. Xiao didn't rush to respond, calmly fending off the onslaught, and thanks to his reverse system, he received new progress points, as if each attack only strengthened him. He soon realized that this opponent was inferior to the previous one, and began to think through a strategy, assessing the opponent's weaknesses and choosing the most favorable moment. The audience had already noticed that his sword will was unusually strong, and in that instant, he seemed like a sharpened blade, ready to cut through any obstacle. Using a technique that surpassed all the enemy's attacks, Zhao drew a circle with his sword, and the space around him seemed to shake, as if unable to withstand the force. The teacher on the dais was startled, because the technique of the disciple, which he did not expect to win, clearly did not belong to the style of the Great Wind. The fourth sister calmly remarked that this move belonged to the elder sister's canon, as if continuing the mentor's thought and revealing the source of power. On the parade ground, the battle grew even more intense. The movement became rapid, and the tension grew as if a battle at the limit of life was unfolding in front of everyone. For a moment, Lin stared blankly ahead, where the enemy had been a moment ago, but now there was only emptiness in front of him. His eyes were searching for the wrong threat, because Xiao was already behind him, raising his sword for a decisive blow, and the situation changed in an instant. Without giving too much time, he slammed the hilt of his sword between his shoulder blades, remembering that the goal was not to kill, but to win, and his movement was precise and calculated. The rapidly progressing novice calmly pronounced the name of the move, Fire Scare, as he watched the opponent's body lose its strength and begin to fall in response to the blow. With a cry of pain and terror, the young man collapsed to the ground face down, arms outstretched, and his previous self-confidence vanished without a trace, along with defeat. The crowd was perplexed, trying to figure out if he was still alive, and how the Great Wind technique could be so powerful that the outcome was decided in one blow. Zhou turned to the audience and assured them that the opponent had only fainted, reminding them that clan brothers didn't kill each other, and his words sounded calm. The students discussed what had happened, looking at the fallen man, trying to understand how the one they thought was the strongest had lost so quickly and without a chance. Returning to his goal, Xiao asked if anyone wanted to challenge him for 8th place in the Four Clan Spring Trials, and his voice was firm. He gestured for everyone to come forward, not concealing his determination, and there wasn't a shred of doubt or hesitation in his confidence. However, no one dared to speak, and the remaining people only discussed whether he was the strongest among the newbies who had not yet reached the Kui mode. The elders also exchanged opinions, predicting a great future for him, and wondered how he had mastered the canon and who had become his mentor. The youth's mentor stood up and announced that it was Xiao who would be the 8th test participant from their clan, acknowledging his victory in front of everyone. After accepting the recognition, the winner reflected on the spiritual energy expended, pondering how to obtain explosive fire pills from the third elder for further growth. Alchemy Peak was located high in the mountains, hidden by clouds, and seemed like a place where nature itself guarded the secrets of an ancient art. As agreed, the young man had come there to learn the basics of alchemy that third sister Jing He had agreed to pass on. Looking around, he searched for the girl, but there was no sign of her presence. Suddenly, a hand was laid on his back so abruptly that anyone would have flinched, and the suddenness made him tense. It was his mentor, who had already hugged him from behind, welcoming him joyfully, and there was genuine warmth in her gesture. She sternly looked at the girl and asked where she was and why she came back so late, and his tone was demanding. She was embarrassed and tried to change the subject, saying that the explosive pills were almost ready, but for now, she suggested that we start with the basics of alchemy. Deftly climbing up to the tall cabinets, she continued to explain that the pill art required not only strength, but also exceptional precision in every action. Under Xiao's careful gaze, she explained that the quality of the ingredients affected the pill patterns, and the better they were, the cleaner and brighter the lines became. Fascinated by her skill, he seemed lost in thought, repeating the last words like an echo, unable to take his eyes off the scene. Noticing the interest of the youth, who was showing a subtle warmth, the third elder decided to take advantage of the moment by complaining about the heat in the room and asking for help to take off her wet socks. Xiao watched her playful gestures in confusion, as if disbelieving what was happening, and stood still, not knowing how to react to such an unexpected turn. As she waited for the answer, Jinghe mentally justified herself, thinking that since her sisters had already resorted to such tricks, then she was allowed to charm the young man. When he regained consciousness, he said with obvious embarrassment that he was following the rules of decency and men and women should not be so close to each other. When he refused, she frowned and coldly reminded him that she might not give him the pills he ordered if he continued to resist her wishes. Realizing that he had no choice, Xiao knelt down in front of his mentor, explaining to himself that he was forced to do this by circumstances. In the midst of all this, the door was flung open and the fourth elder appeared, instantly breaking the delicate balance. She moved quickly and jerked the boy roughly back by the collar, pulling him away from his sister, and there was a clear determination in her movement to intervene. The sisters exchanged cold glances, filled with tension, as each of them was eager to get Xiao into their circle of students. Pretending that nothing much had happened, Jinghe confusedly asked why her sister had entered without knocking, trying to steer the conversation away. However, the guest wasn't going to back down, demanding an explanation and keeping a close eye on both of them, not allowing the true state of affairs to be concealed. There was concern in her words, and she suspected that her sister might have taken advantage of her position, and she was ready to report it to her eldest. Unwilling to let this happen, the third elder hurriedly covered her mouth with her hand, assuring her that it wasn't as it might seem. Jinghe insisted that the extra emotions would only attract the young man's attention, and then their secret might be revealed, which should not be allowed. Xiao listened carefully and observed, and now he was completely convinced that the girls were hiding something important, especially Jinghe. Flushed, the girl insisted that they hadn't violated the separation rules and tried to sound as confident as possible. Realizing the existence of these rules, the youth felt annoyed, but quickly suppressed it, realizing that for the sake of pills, it was better to remain calm. The guy intervened and calmly explained that he was just helping the mentor, doing a foot massage without any hidden meaning. The fourth elder finally shifted her gaze to him and clarified exactly what he was doing, listening intently to every word. Xiu hurried to explain that he had a special technique against leg numbness that he had learned in his family and only wanted to help. As he continued to speak, he added bright details to the description, trying to give the words credibility and distract attention from the awkward situation. Sister Mo was surprised, and Jinghe hurried to support him, assuring him that the technique was indeed extremely useful. After confirming the plausibility of the explanation, the fourth elder thought that it was precisely such methods that helped Xiao recover quickly. After evaluating the benefits, she firmly stated that now the young man should apply this technique for her, leaving no room for refusal. Turning to her sister, she added that she would take him away for a few days, because he had already agreed, and her words sounded confident. Listening to their conversation, Xiao thought that he was being treated like a thing, and this caused him to internally protest. Annoyed, Jinghe retorted that she had already made an agreement with the young man, and the sister had no right to interfere and destroy the agreement. Sister Mo only chuckled as she noticed that the pill direction had no future and didn't deserve much attention. The argument between them was heated up, each defending their own area, while the youth silently watched without interfering. Finally, he cautiously asked them to stop fighting, trying to get the conversation back on track and avoid further conflict. The fourth elder pulled the boy towards her, praising his talent and calling him a formation master, claiming that this was much more interesting. Jinghe abruptly stood up and announced that Xiao would be studying alchemy from her, not giving in. The taller sister ignored the protest, remaining confident in her superiority. She put her hand on her sister's head and easily pushed it away, making room for herself and the boy. Suddenly, a massive explosion shook the hall, instantly interrupting their argument and causing everyone to freeze. The shock wave threw them out, and they ended up on the ground, dazed but thankfully unharmed. Jinghe kept her head down and cried as she realized that it was the pills she had prepared for Xiao that had exploded. The young man did not reproach her, but began to pick up the fragments of potions, moving calmly among the scattered remains. A look of joy appeared on his face, as he knew that even defective pills could be much more useful than ordinary ones. The fourth elder leaned over and quietly suggested that they run away together, as if sharing a secret plan. Without waiting for an answer, she grabbed him and lifted him off the ground, dragging him easily with her. Before leaving the peak, Sister Mo promised to show the hidden dragon veins that she spoke about with obvious enthusiasm. Jing He shouted from behind, accusing her sister of violating the agreement and promising punishment. Xiao felt uneasy because there was very little time left before the trials, and everything that was happening was knocking him out of rhythm. The girl did not show any concern, deciding that if others played unfairly, she would simply take the young man for herself. Xiao's head was buzzing from the rapid flight and constant changes that made it impossible for him to concentrate. Under the light of the full moon, they sped through the night, heading for what she described as a new world. When he landed in the pine forest, he asked if these were indeed the hidden dragon veins. Following her step by step, he made no secret of his impatience, asking questions and trying to learn as much as possible about the new place. Sister Mo began to explain calmly and thoughtfully that one's true potential is revealed only when one passes the line of life and death, where fear recedes before the desire to survive. Hearing this, the young man felt a cold uneasiness. He could not understand whether the mentor was leading him to strength or to death, because his level was still too low. As she started the fire with a gentle wave of her hand, she confidently added that she would teach him a technique that surpassed all previous ones, and there was a power in her voice that brooked no doubt. As he stood behind her, he wondered how she knew his skills, and gradually came to realize that the mentors were watching his every move carefully. Turning abruptly, the girl sternly asked why he was not interested, because such a chance for many would be the limit of dreams and rare luck. Sitting down next to her, Xiao admitted that she was right, but in his mind he was worried about how his system would react to the new loads, anticipating the hidden price for rapid growth. As he stared at the fire-warmed face of his mentor, he continued to reason, knowing that frequent blows would only speed up his development, and in this he found a strange consolation. Suddenly, the girl called out to him, short and clear, breaking him out of his thoughts, and there was a determination in the sound that did not allow for delay. Then she tossed him a small ball, decorated with delicate patterns, and it rested softly in her palm, as if hiding something more than a simple thing. Our hero carefully examined the object, turning it between his fingers, and with sincere interest asked what exactly it holds and what power it conceals. Sister Mo explained that there were only 16 heaven and earthborn stones in the entire 21 continents, and each of them was capable of becoming the heart of a powerful formation. She added that this stone belongs to the highest black rank, and therefore requires careful treatment, because its power can change the outcome of any confrontation. Struck by such generosity, Xiao felt a deep sense of gratitude, his heart filled with respect, because such gifts are not made without a good reason. Without wasting any time, the mentor casually asked what form he had mastered the sword cannon to, watching his reaction with barely noticeable interest. Touching the back of his head in embarrassment, the young man admitted that he had only mastered the first form so far, feeling that his words sounded too modest against the background of expectations. Pointing to a huge boulder covered with moss, the girl ordered to hit it without restraint, as if testing not only the strength, but also the determination of the student. Xiao approached the stone with confident steps, gathering his will together, not wanting to appear weak in front of his mentor and himself. He chose a technique with an unusual name, associated with the image of a frightened phoenix, feeling the energy begin to respond to his intention. The flames engulfed his body in a bright glow, so powerful that even the surrounding trees seemed to respond to this surge of power. The impact split the boulder apart, and the young man remained standing there, calm and focused, feeling satisfied with the result. As she watched, she understood why others were eager to get it, because even a basic understanding of the canon opens up huge opportunities for them. With a smile, Xiao asked if she was happy with what she saw, hoping to hear approval that would confirm his path was correct. However, the girl assessed the result with restraint, saying that it was acceptable for his level, thereby encouraging him to strive for more. Raising a finger to the sky, she created a semi-transparent dome around them, filling the space with a soft blue light that hid what was happening. Inside this field, the shattered boulder once again came together, and the mentor again ordered to strike, not allowing her to relax. This time, the young man decided to use the gift stone, hoping that its hidden power would strengthen the attack and allow him to reach a new level. The girl carefully observed, thinking that the formation path enhances the flow of ki according to one's talent, and even a partial disclosure of power is already rare. Seeing how the youth seemed to merge with the stone, she realized his natural aptitude for formations, knowing that this was a rare talent. As he gripped the stone, Xiao could feel the energy rapidly diminishing, and the system's notifications increased the internal tension. He frowned, unwilling to back down, and gathered his remaining strength to prove to himself and his mentor that he was capable of more. After repeating the previous spell, Xiao put all his will into it, hoping to see the same destructive effect again. But the result was different. The power seemed to dissipate before reaching its goal, and this unexpected weakening surprised both the student and the mentor. Shocked by his sudden weakness, he slowly turned to his mentor, trying to find an answer in her eyes because just now the strength had left him without any explanation. She also couldn't immediately understand the reason, and her annoyance grew because the formation stone had always acted flawlessly, and now it was as if it had rejected the disciple himself. The fourth elder flared up in anger, seeing what had happened as a personal defeat, refusing to accept the idea that she had made a mistake in such an obvious matter. Neither the flame-related formation nor the sky-ripping formation had any effect, which only served to increase the feeling of the youth's strange power inconsistency. Hugging her knees, the mentor sat on the ground, absently drawing lines with her wand, as if trying to figure out the complex reason for her failure through simple movements. Approaching it cautiously, Xiao quietly suggested that we try other ways, suggesting that we should try out weakening formations instead of strengthening them. The girl looked up at him in surprise, and he calmly explained that if the usual approach didn't work, it might be worth trying the opposite. Hesitating but not wanting to miss the chance, the lady decided to test the basic weakening formation, which usually reduces the flow of qi in anyone who enters its field. However, contrary to expectations, the effect was reversed. The young man felt a surge of strength, his stance became more confident, and his eyes were filled with determination to continue. After receiving confirmation of strengthening through weakening, he felt his mood return, and the previous setbacks no longer weighed on his confidence. The next blow was much more powerful. A stream of fiery energy surged forward with a bright force, leaving behind a tangible trail. The ground in front of him split into a deep furrow, and even the mentor behind him felt the echoes of this attack filled with new energy. Sister Mo couldn't hide her astonishment, as she had never seen such a phenomenon before, when a weakening formation strengthened the one it was aimed at. Stretching his shoulders, Xiao calmly noted that this approach was perfect for him, and aloud only asked his mentor how she rated his punch. While thinking about further training, the fourth elder carefully examined the youth, her eyes filled with concern, but in her heart of hearts, she recognized that she had already set him on the right path. After giving him the new manual, she told him to start by studying the 9 heavenly worlds canon, adding that it was this technique that would help him build a stable foundation of power. Satisfied with the variety of knowledge gained, the young man asked with keen interest where the next stage of training would lead them, feeling ready for new challenges. The girl replied that the path lay through the forest, and at dawn they would go to the settlement of free practitioners, where danger becomes a part of everyday life. The Earth Dragon settlement met them with a harsh atmosphere, the heavy air and intense gazes, giving them the feeling of a place where only the strongest survive. Voices came from all directions, offering to take part in risky tasks, where the reward was always next to the possibility of not returning. Leading the youth through the crowd, Sister Mo calmly explained that most of the practitioners here had reached the 5th level, so she wouldn't interfere in the upcoming battles. Continuing the explanation, she said that the locals are divided into those who are in permanent organizations and those who gather temporary groups for hiking in the mountains. She added that their squad needs just such temporary allies, making it clear that the young man is already considered part of this team. Walking up to the leader of the group, a stern and strong man, Xiao offered himself but was met with a hesitant response because his appearance seemed too young. Frustrated by yet another underestimation, the young man paused for a moment, holding back his annoyance as he considered how to prove his worth. Without wasting any words, he struck the stone wall, and the force of the blow caused the leader to change his mind, recognizing the youth's hidden potential. Struck by the discrepancy between appearance and strength, the man still agreed to accept him into the group, deciding not to miss such a fighter. Pointing to the young man's companion, he rudely asked if she would join him, not concealing his dismissive tone. Putting his arm around Sister Mo's shoulders, Xiao calmly called her his consort, confidently adding that she would be by his side all the way. Already in the forest, the group dispersed, some discussing the past task, others wandering around without a goal, and Xiao chose to stay on the sidelines, watching what was happening. Analyzing his achievements, he noted an increase in bone strength and increased spiritual energy, realizing that even a short time in danger brings tangible benefits. A sudden shout from one of the contestants made everyone alert, and the group's attention instantly shifted to the threat. A huge black snake appeared as if from nowhere, its size surpassing everyone present, and its gaze inspired primal fear. The leader informed them that this was a stone python of the 8th rank and warned them not to act lightly, understanding the scale of the threat. The python loomed over the humans, slowly sticking out its purple tongue, as if studying its prey before attacking. With a sharp movement, he grabbed one of the fighters, and the others froze, startled by the speed and brutality of what was happening. Rising up, the snake threw the others with a powerful blow of its tail, and the bodies of the people scattered, unable to resist this force. Pausing, the python seemed to be enjoying their fear, its gaze filled with cold superiority and confidence. The leader, not hiding his panic, ordered to immediately activate the containment formation, realizing that without this, there is no chance. The remaining fighters hurried to obey the order, each using the techniques available to them, trying to slow the monster down. Up to this point, Xiao, who had been watching from the sidelines, realized that the moment had come to intervene, because the situation was rapidly spiraling out of control. Summoning the sword through a technique from the cannon, he focused, feeling the energy fill his body. Rushing forward with determination, the young man raised his weapon, preparing to unleash a series of powerful blows. At the same time, the fallen serpent fell heavily at the feet of the leader, its huge body still twitching in the last convulsions, while the man looked at the prey in confusion, not finding an explanation for such a rapid death. Xiao was standing behind him, hiding his fatigue behind a modest smile, and the leader was already loudly announcing the reward, promising half a core, sincerely considering the victory to be the result of luck and an unexpected combination of circumstances. Suddenly, the silence was broken by the footsteps of a new group, and from the depths of the forest, statuesque people in expensive clothes came out, their appearance confident and cold, as if they already considered this place their territory. One of them stepped forward, introducing himself as Ye Wuqi from the Valley of Question, his voice calm but with a hint of hidden threat, and the people behind him were silent, confirming his strength. At that moment, Sister Mo gently jumped down from the branch. Her movement was light and almost imperceptible, and she stood next to Xiao, as if she had been watching for a long time from the shadows of the dense crowns. In a calm voice, she explained that they were looking at the same test participants and suggested that they not interfere yet, watching the development of events, as if assessing the strength and intentions of uninvited guests. The leader of the group frowned, his face darkened, and he asked the outsiders about the purpose of their appearance, not hiding his annoyance, because the appearance of such strong practitioners meant a threat to all their prey. Yewuki chuckled, and his expression became almost frantic as he directly stated that he had come to rob, saying it so calmly as if it was something ordinary and natural. One of the practitioners couldn't stand such an insult and rushed forward, shouting that the origin does not give the right to take someone else's property, but his determination was weaker than the opponent's confidence. Utsui only extended his hand, and the attack was stopped in an instant. His calmness didn't waver, and there was a hint of disdain in his voice for the attacker's weakness. With a slight effort, he twisted his opponent's arm as if playing, and only smiled when he noticed that the first layer of ki mode couldn't even touch his real strength. Pain shot through the attacker's body, and his cry echoed through the forest, a mixture of despair and fear, because he realized his mistake too late. As the man was thrown back, his comrades caught him, trying to keep him on his feet, and there was anger in their voices, but behind it was fear of the strength of the new enemy. Utsui spoke again. His voice deepened as he stated that his diamond body was on the verge of breaking through, and he needed beast cores to complete this step. Raising his voice, he created a sphere of energy around him that pressed down on those around him, and declared that it was a great honor to serve him, and the observers already understood how high his level was. The pressure of his aura was almost physical, but it was a source of growth for Xiao, and he watched the opponent with interest, finding him a worthy opponent. The men in the group began to talk, gathering their courage, their leader encouraging them, claiming that their numerical advantage would help them survive this encounter. Realizing that no one would willingly give in, Utsui prepared for battle, his eyes cold and his movements confident, ready to take by force what he considered his own. His sword flashed in his hands, light and fast, and he was the first to attack the leader, striking out with frightening speed, as if cutting through the very air around him. The big man held on with all his strength, taking the blows and retreating step by step, his face tense, but he didn't allow himself to retreat completely. With each passing second, the pressure increased, and his weapon began to crack, thin lines of destruction creeping along the blade, heralding the imminent end of the resistance. At that moment, a hand was laid on his shoulder, and a calm voice offered to help. There was no doubt in it, only confidence and quiet determination. Xiao Xiao stepped forward, taking the blows on himself, his body trembling. But the opponent's energy was being transformed inside of him, amplifying his own power. The leader supported him, his voice filled with sincere gratitude, and he did not hide his relief, realizing that he had just escaped death. Utsui stood motionless, his face still cold, but there was a hint of annoyance in his eyes. He hadn't expected such a turn, and was carefully assessing the new opponent. Xiao Xiao straightened up and threw out a harsh word with a grin. His voice was light, but there was a hidden sneer in it, aimed directly at the opponent's heart. Utsuya's eyes widened. He wasn't used to such audacity, and he held back his anger and asked him to repeat what he had said, as if giving him one last chance to come to his senses. But the young cultivator only laughed, his words becoming even sharper, as he calmly pointed out the weakness of the opponent's mind, as if toying with him in front of everyone. Enraged to the limit, Utsui gathered all his strength, his energy sparked, and he prepared to launch a strike that would destroy everyone in front of him. The pressure of his aura became unbearable, but for a beginner with the reverse system, it turned into growth, and his spiritual rank rose, strengthening every cell in his body. With rage in his eyes, the opponent charged forward. His speed was fast, and he already saw victory, not doubting the outcome. His men looked on with admiration, confident in his strength, their gazes filled with faith, and none of them allowed the thought of defeat to enter their minds. Xiao Xiao carefully observed the technique, memorizing every move. There was no fear in his gaze, only interest and a desire to master what he saw. He took a step forward to meet the attack, calm and collected, his smile barely noticeable, but there was a sense of self-confidence in it. The leader wanted to stop him, but Sister Mo put her hand on his shoulder. Her gaze was stern, and she didn't let him interfere. Xiao activated the Starfire technique, and the energy swirled around his arm, creating a vortex filled with power and hidden power. The vortex expanded, growing denser and brighter, its movement accelerating as if it had a life of its own, preparing to meet the attack. Utsui didn't have time to react. His eyes widened, and for the first time there was a glimmer of doubt in them. He didn't expect to see such power. His body was being thrown back like a blow of wind, and he couldn't help but lose control of the situation that just a moment ago seemed to be under his control. With a thud, he crashed into a tree, the air rushing out of his chest, and for a moment it was unclear if he would be able to get up again. His men rushed to him, calling his name, their voices filled with alarm, unable to believe what they were seeing and trying to understand his condition. Xiao stood calmly, considering the fight, recognizing the strength of the opponent, and realizing that without his special ability, the outcome could be much more dangerous. Holding back the pain, the loser stood up in order to retreat, his voice sharp, knowing that now was not the time to continue the fight. The victor didn't stop them, just watched them go, his calmness almost impersonal, as if the outcome was obvious to him. Promising to return for revenge, the defeated Utsui tried to maintain his dignity, but there was a hidden bitterness of defeat in his words. His group disappeared as quickly as it had appeared, leaving behind a pitted ground and a heavy sense of past collision. Calmly acknowledging Yewuki's strength, the fourth elder added with a cold grin that after their encounter at the spring trials, he wouldn't show any mercy to the young cultivator. Walking slowly forward, the young man went over his plans aloud, confidently promising himself to master formations and explosive pills, as if paving the way for a new power in advance. Holding out the bag of cores, the leader of the group discreetly noted that the 70 cores were the gang's sincere gratitude for the rescue, emphasizing the seriousness of their appreciation. Suddenly, the fourth elder appeared from behind the youth, her voice dry and impatient, reminding him that there was no need to linger any longer, and it was time to move on. Deciding not to argue, he turned to the main participant, gratefully accepting the gift and explaining that his supposedly wife was tired, so they urgently needed to leave. As they stepped back, the crowd showered them with words of gratitude, promising to remember the youth's kindness forever, as if trying to repay them for their salvation. Easily reproaching him for his greed, Sister Mo walked beside him without taking her hand away, and they gradually disappeared into the distance, leaving behind a noise of grateful voices. Suddenly stopping abruptly, the guy felt an unbearable pain shoot through his body, as if an invisible force was tearing him from the inside out without the slightest mercy. He pressed his hand to his chest, trying to catch the rhythm of his heart, while the fourth elder said irritably that she didn't intend to carry him again. With a heavy sigh, Xiao turned around at the sound of the voice, sticky beads of sweat already dripping down his face, revealing real weakness and growing exhaustion. Losing his footing, he fell forward, but the girl managed to catch him, barely holding him, and anxiously asked what was happening to him. Realizing the consequences of the fight, the young man realized that defeating Yewukyu was too expensive, and he sat down and leaned on the girl's shoulder, trying to stay conscious. Squeezing the last of his strength, he quietly asked for a break, admitting that he was completely exhausted and unable to take a step further. Left with no choice, the fourth elder reluctantly agreed, sinking down beside him, a wistful look in her eyes hidden behind her usual sternness. Above them, the night was clear and warm, devoid of clouds, as if made for long walks and rare moments of peace. Slowly recovering, he woke up from a deep sleep that finally allowed his body to regain its strength. As soon as he opened his eyes, he heard Sister Mo's sarcastic remark about how well he had slept. Abruptly demanding to get up, she spoke faster than usual, and there was a strange confusion in her voice, as if something was bothering her. Finally, shaking off the dream, he pulled back, studying her face carefully, trying to understand the reason for her sudden irritation. Leaning her head on her hand, she avoided looking directly at him, and her cheeks were flushed, revealing her inner turmoil. The next moment, she lost her balance and fell on top of Xiao, causing him to anxiously ask what had happened to her. It turned out that the reason was simple, because her leg was stiff during the time she was sitting, guarding his sleep and not moving. As she struggled to get up, she noted that, at his level, it was urgent to master formations in order to avoid deadly fights in the future. Drawing out the manual as if from nowhere, Sister Mo explained that diagrams require controlling the changes in shui, unlike the usual techniques. Without delay, she created a diagram and told him to focus so that he could get a feel for its structure and learn how to reproduce it on his own. Sprawled out on top of the pattern, the young disciple nonchalantly swung his legs in the air, drawing the teacher's displeased gaze. In response to her question, he confidently stated that his lazy cultivation method was twice as effective, as if it was an obvious truth. Almost immediately, the system confirmed his words by issuing notifications about the growth of power dissipation diagram comprehension points. Reluctantly accepting this, the girl only gave a curt nod as she continued to watch the student beaming with joy. With a wave of her hand, she whipped up a whirlwind around her, ignoring his questions and leaving him in the dark. Holding back her answer, she only said that the guy would soon figure it out for himself, and a sly smile flickered on her lips. At the same time, a dark purple energy surged out from the depths, filling the space with an ominous tension. As the darkness deepened, it took on the form of a raging beast, its eyes blazing with scarlet rage. Shocked, the young man could not look away, while the mentor standing next to him was in no hurry to interfere or explain what was happening. It wasn't until a moment later that she explained that this was a tiger king with a shell that possessed the 8th rank of strength. Realizing the difference, the guy desperately pleaded, pointing out that he had barely recovered, and such an ordeal was too cruel. Calmly assuring him of her good intentions, she wished him luck and went to the mountain spring, leaving him alone with the monster. As he carefully assessed the opponent, Xiao thought that a rank 8 beast was comparable to a high-level practitioner, but its innate power was far more dangerous. After taking out the stone previously handed over by his mentor, the disciple decided to use the beast as a test, wanting to hone his control over the formation and consolidate his advantage over future trials. Without giving him time to think, the tiger was already towering over him, rearing up on its hind legs, its massive frame casting a heavy shadow. Calmly assessing the threat, the young man did not give in to fear, but for the sake of tactics, he retreated a few steps, keeping his distance and waiting for the right moment. Lowering its heavy paw, the beast stepped onto the diagram, its long claws easily able to tear through flesh, and there was a clear intent to attack in this move. Moving forward, the tiger let out a low growl that seemed to thicken the air, and even an experienced practitioner could feel an involuntary chill inside. Holding his confidence, Xiao took the onslaught as a chance, instantly gathering himself and taking a stance, preparing to use his opponent's every move. Abruptly, he kicked off the ground and soared up, gripping his sword, channeling all his strength into a swift and precise overhead kick. The blade left a noticeable mark on the eye area, but the rest of the beast's body was almost intact, as if protected by heavy armor. As he retreated, he thought hard about what he had heard earlier, while also realizing how tough the enemy's hide was in front of him. Focusing his gaze, he noted the center of the diagram, where the flow of energy was most dense, which meant that the impact might increase. A sudden sense of danger interrupted his thoughts, and he spun around in an instant, relying on his instincts and well-honed reflexes. This saved him, for the beast was already striking, and its paw could reach the target if he slowed down even for a moment. Avoiding a direct collision, Xiao began to lead the opponent closer to the center, carefully directing his movements to the desired point. What usually weakened him was now working in his favor, and he could already feel the advantage gradually shifting to his side. Filled with determination, he prepared to spring, gathering his strength for the final blow that would decide the outcome of the fight. Noticing the result, the student saw that the attacks were starting to leave traces, and this confirmed that his calculation was correct. Without slowing down, the young man continued to advance, throwing punches one after another, relying on his fists and clear calculation. Immersed in the warmth of the spring, the fourth elder allowed herself a short rest, enjoying the rare calm of the night. Turning her head, she took in the progress of the battle, and a flicker of satisfaction showed in her eyes as the apprentice once again showed ingenuity. Sensing someone else's aura, which was too obvious, the girl became wary, realizing that it was impossible to ignore it anymore. As she dressed quickly, the young master felt annoyed that the quiet evening had suddenly been replaced by new worries. Meanwhile, Shui Yun Yao found herself in the werewolf's tight embrace, trying to convince him of her innocence. Watching from the side, the fourth elder immediately recognized the girl, but couldn't understand why she was here. Noticing the threat, she was surprised that someone would dare challenge a saint beast of such a high level. Not wanting to waste too much, Sister Mo clasped her hands and activated the radiant formation, channeling the power to suppress. As it rose into the air, it caused circles of energy that gradually weakened the opponent and robbed them of their advantage. Having achieved the result, the savior watched as the beast lost its stability and the girl fell with it. Falling from a height, she had time to think that after living 2 lives, it was stupid to end them this way. Rushing after, Sister Mo struggled to catch up with the falling body, cutting through the night air. Grabbing her, she gently lowered her to the ground, propping her up against a boulder as she quickly assessed the situation. As she considered her next move, the master realized that having a disciple around made the situation extremely uncomfortable. Imagining the possible consequences, she clearly realized that meeting a disciple with this woman would bring unnecessary difficulties. As she held out the blue pill, she told herself that it was better this way, since Xiao already had enough mentors. Opening her mouth cautiously, she put the potion in, working carefully and without unnecessary movements. Turning away, Mo said something like an apology in a low voice, explaining that she needed a temporary nap. Meanwhile, the battle continued unabated, their movements becoming sharper, their breathing becoming heavier, and the tension between the two men increased with each new attack. Absorbing the streams of energy released by the beast's blows, the young man felt an inner uplift and easily broke through to a new stage of spiritual power. Having mastered the diagram completely, he did not hesitate to apply it directly in battle, testing every facet of control and the power of his own understanding. Abruptly shouting out an order, Xiao put all the accumulated energy into the final strike, which was more powerful than all the previous attacks. Piercing through space, a bright stream of power struck the beast's body, and it let out a shrill howl as it sensed the end approaching. Wrapped in fiery energy, the tiger disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only a void that clearly showed the youth's victory. Exhaling heavily, the student allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction, then immediately went to find his mentor. Peering into the shadows, he called out to her, but the forest only responded with a dull silence, as if to hide her presence. Moving deeper, the student found himself in front of a dense thicket, where branches intertwined so tightly that they almost did not let in light. Looking around, he continued to search, and the alarm gradually grew, telling him that something had gone wrong. Suddenly, the sharp smell of blood cut through the air, cold and metallic, making my heart clench. Realizing the source of the smell, the disciple couldn't help but tense up, thinking that something might have happened to Sister Mo. Without thinking, he rushed forward, quickening his pace, eager to find his mentor as soon as possible. Following his gut feeling, he came to a cave that was hidden by moss and almost merged with the surrounding stone. Having made up his mind, he went inside, peering into the darkness and repeating her name, hoping to hear a response. Soon, his gaze came across a motionless body, but when he realized that it wasn't the one he was looking for, he only became more wary. As he looked closer, he noticed a girl in sacred clan clothing, and the connection between this place and his past came back to him. Slowly opening her eyes, she looked bleary, as if coming back from a deep sleep in which she had spent too long. Almost immediately, the one who had just woken up stiffened, clenching her fists, preparing to defend herself at the slightest threat. In turn, Xiao didn't recognize her, trying to figure out who was in front of him and what to expect. The sudden weakness drained her strength, and she went limp, falling into the arms of the young man who caught her in time. Shivering from the cold, overwhelmed with fatigue, she complained softly, while he, bewildered by what was happening, did not feel anything like it. For a moment, he wondered what it would look like from the outside, and the thought made him pause uncomfortably. Deciding to help, the guy carefully supported her, trying to warm her at least so much because there were no other ways in the cave. Gradually, the warmth took effect, and the girl's breathing became even, allowing her to recover. So they stayed close as the night enveloped them in a soft silence, not interfering with what was happening. Opening her eyes again, the lady muttered something unintelligible in a low voice, her brow furrowed with residual weakness. When she finally woke up, she met his eyes and recognized him as Xiao Nan. Realizing the proximity, the savior hastily pulled away and began to explain haltingly, waving his arms. She stared at him thoughtfully, trying to figure out how he'd ended up here and what role he'd played. In turn, he studied her expression, trying to decide whether to expect a threat or gratitude. Finally, she asked for his name, and the younger student calmly introduced himself without adding anything unnecessary. To his surprise, the girl smiled softly and thanked him for saving her, bowing her head in appreciation. Embarrassed, he tried to explain that he hadn't done anything significant and that his involvement was accidental. Easily interrupting him, she offered to join the sacred clan, promising to teach him rare techniques. Feeling a strange openness, the guy asked if she really knew him. Thinking about it, the rescued woman hesitated, realizing that the answer could affect the future relationship. Choosing to be careful, she referred to his clothes and even promised to accept him as a personal disciple. As he watched her, he noticed a familiar expression in her eyes similar to the behavior of other mentors. After politely thanking him, the disciple declined, explaining that he was already committed to the Sword Clan. Suddenly, Sister Mo's voice rang out from outside, calling out to him through the trees. Delighted, the young man turned around, but at the same time, the girl's hand covered his mouth, calling him to silence with just a glance. Sensing the familiar aura, the newly rescued woman quickly realized who exactly was calling the youth and guessed that it was one of the elders. When the danger was gone, she released him, and he sucked in a deep breath, blushing for lack of breath. Still reeling, Xiao was unprepared for what he would see next and froze, not understanding what was happening. For no apparent reason, the girl started to take off her clothes, acting calmly as if it was something natural. Embarrassed, he turned away abruptly, begging her to stop, not wanting to witness a strange scene. However, it soon became clear that Xiao was mistaken, as he was only looking at a piece of clothing that she was holding out to him. Calmly explaining, she said that the vest was made from water phoenix feathers, and its defense grew with the wearer's strength. Looking at the gift, the young man involuntarily wondered how appropriate it was to wear such a thing, and felt clearly embarrassed. Without further explanation, she put on a blue stone pendant that glimmered softly in the dim light. Taking a step toward the exit, the rescued woman turned around and promised that their paths would cross again. In the next instant, the young woman rose into the air, disappearing as suddenly as she had appeared. In the silence of the cave, rapid footsteps rang out, breaking the calm and bringing him back to reality. Appearing nearby, the fourth elder anxiously asked what he was doing in this place. Her gaze immediately settled on the object in his hands and recognition flickered in her eyes. While explaining the item's origin, he didn't notice her confusion, whereas she already understood the rarity of the artifact. Nodding stiffly, Sister Mo said that since it was a gift, it was safe to wear it. Fumbling with the vest, he tried to figure out how to put it on without showing his embarrassment. Wanting to distract himself, he offered to continue training, trying to forget the strange encounter. Meanwhile, a young person was standing nearby, surrounded by several men, whose intentions seemed unclear but concerning. Trying to defend herself with words, she claimed her position in the clan, hoping to scare off the attackers. One of them came closer, assuring that no one in these places would know what was happening. Realizing the hopelessness, the young girl clenched her teeth, trying not to show fear of the overwhelming force. Without stopping, the man demanded to pass the technique, taking step by step closer. Reaching out to her, the impudent man was about to take what he wanted by force, leaving her no choice. Stripped of their weapons, the victim could only shout curses as they tried to fight back. Suddenly, a stream of yellow-scarlet energy erupted between them, cutting through the space. Irritably, the attacker turned around and tried to understand the source of the sudden interference. A flood of power pulled them apart, forcing them both to close their eyes against the glare. Everyone present turned around, eager to see who dared to interfere. Coming out of the shade of the trees, the young man chided the men for their behavior with a grin. The girl recognized him at once, and her eyes flashed with hope of escape. Shivering, she hugged herself, realizing that this was a man she hadn't heard the kindest words about. After quickly assessing the situation, Xiao understood the girl's identity and decided to step in, considering it his duty to do so. Turning his attention to him, the man mockingly noted that his level was too low for such audacity. Realizing the danger, the girl screamed, urging him to leave, because the opponents were much stronger. Not giving up, the girl continued to threaten them with retribution from the clan. Raising his hand, Xiao stopped the flow of words with a gesture, showing calm confidence. With a firm voice, he advised them to leave before the situation got worse. In response, there was a loud laugh, full of contempt and ridicule, because no one expected a threat from such a young practitioner. One of the men drew his sword, preparing for battle, promising to deal with the enemy quickly. With a flourish, he charged forward, intending to end the fight with a single punch. Watching this, the girl turned pale, fearing for the life of the one who had come to her defense. However, the young man remained calm, and the blade only passed close by without hitting him. The next blow was just as clumsy, and he easily dodged again. Without wasting any time, Xiao focused, and a bright light flashed in his hands again. Unlike the opponent, his attack was accurate and sure, reaching the target. After receiving the blow, the man flew back, falling heavily to the ground, simultaneously leaving potholes on it. Without stopping, the youth instantly rose into the air, continuing to advance. The defender slammed down hard and hit the solar plexus area, ending the attack with a powerful fall. Assessing the defeated opponent, Xiao calmly remarked that such an opponent was not even worth wasting the power of the sword, demonstrating complete superiority. Glancing at each other, the remaining men realized with horror that their leader had been defeated with frightening ease. Watching this, the girl couldn't believe that this was the same person who was once considered incompetent. Turning to the others, Xiao harshly ordered them to get out while they were still able to walk on their own. Picking up their comrade, they retreated, shouting threats and promising to complain, trying to preserve the remnants of dignity. Only when their silhouettes disappeared did the girl dare to come closer, looking gratefully at her rescuer. With a light smile, the winner replied that he hadn't done anything special and advised her to get back to her friends as soon as possible. After a moment's hesitation, she lowered her gaze and apologized for her cousin's actions, deciding to tell the truth. With a sharp change, Xiao clarified whether she was really related to Nalangor. With an embarrassed nod, the woman saved from theft apologized again, avoiding his direct gaze. Controlling his annoyance, he replied sharply, making it clear that he did not want to discuss such things through third parties. Trying to smooth the conversation, the girl held out the book, calling it a valuable trophy found in the beast's lair. Assessing her behavior, the defender noted that she was noticeably different from her relative. Seeing no reason to refuse, the young man accepted the gift, deciding to take advantage of the opportunity. Wanting to continue the conversation, the girl asked if he would participate in the upcoming tests. Hearing the confirmation, the girl sincerely smiled, assuring that they would meet again. As he watched her go, he heard his mentor's voice behind him, a hint of mockery in it. Trying to justify himself, Xiao said that he simply did not tolerate injustice, although his expression betrayed embarrassment. After switching the conversation, the student asked about his progress, and the mentor confirmed the progress, adding that it was time to return. Meanwhile, a crowd of students had gathered in the classroom, surrounding Big Brother Feng, who was enjoying the attention. As he talked about his cultivation, he proudly described the strength achieved through the sword technique. Listeners discussed the changes, recalling Xiao's recent victory and comparing him to previous favorites. Unwilling to concede, Feng stated that he intended to challenge his place in the trials. At this time, Xiao and his mentor were already returning, cutting through the air with a stream of energy. Feeling tense, he was breathing heavily, as if he had sensed the discussions even before he arrived. Calmly informing him of her affairs, the mentor made it clear that she would soon leave him alone. Once he was used to her presence, he asked with interest what she would be doing. Without waiting for an answer, the disciple began to speculate with a smile, watching her closely. Still joking, the young practitioner hinted at taking a break from the road, clearly enjoying the moment. Unable to stand it any longer, she threw him down abruptly, ending the conversation in the most direct way possible. As he fell to the ground, he muttered a complaint in displeasure, feeling the effects of the landing. Hearing voices, the fallen man turned his head, noticing the worried classmates. Looking around, he realized that he was the center of attention, and all eyes were on him. When he got up, he calmly stated that he had just returned from training. Noticing the tension, he asked what had happened and why everyone was so excited. Stepping forward, one of the students introduced himself as Feng and challenged him to a fight. Taking it in stride, the young cultivator was surprised that it was exactly this that caused such a reaction. With a slight sneer, he remarked that such ambitions should have been shown earlier. Making her way through the crowd, a girl with bright hair appeared, watching the scene with interest. Assessing the situation, she confidently stated that Xiao would lose to a stronger opponent. Knowing her position, the students only strengthened their opinion about the outcome of the battle. Irritated, Xiao replied, hinting that her words were not dictated by objectivity. Hearing this, the girl's face changed dramatically, not used to such an attitude. Overcome by emotion, she rushed forward, taking the words as a challenge. Judging her attack, Xiao noted her level of strength, which was quite large for both her young age and pride. Feeling the pressure, the junior disciple realized that the fight would require full concentration. Staying put, the guy prepared to take the hit, wanting to test her capabilities. However, the fight did not start because the mentor intervened, standing between them. Indignant, the girl did not understand the reason for the stop, considering her actions justified. Watching from behind his mentor, Xiao was also surprised, sensing that he was acting out of concern. Understanding the strength of both students, Master Nu remained cautious, as even a brief outburst of anger could lead to serious consequences. Trying to diffuse the situation, he smiled broadly and gently coaxed the girl to accept the choice she had already made and not escalate the argument. Controlling her annoyance, Rui warned that she would report back to her grandfather if the tutor showed any more partiality toward the students. Pointing at Xiao, she demanded a fight with Feng, reminding him of his new level and wanting to prove his superiority. Raising an eyebrow in surprise, the youth coldly asked who she thought she was, allowing himself to give orders. By intervening again, the mentor tried to stop the conflict, hoping to avoid an unnecessary clash. However, the words about the new level only fueled the interest of Xiao, who decided to prove the opposite. Whispering to each other, the students noted his rapid growth and recalled his previous victories. Pushing Feng, the girl handed him the weapon, increasing his confidence before the fight. Without hesitation, he accepted the blade, eagerly accepting the fight. Convincing himself of victory, Feng assured himself that he was now able to defeat even stronger opponents. Without wasting any time, he charged forward using the swift attack technique. Keeping calm, Xiao chose a simple form, relying on precision and control. With each movement, he looked more confident, as if he was in complete control of the situation. A stream of energy surged forward, forcing the opponent to retreat and defend. Noticing the cracks on the weapon, Feng didn't understand how he was losing out in strength. When the attack ended, the space shook, sending debris and dust flying around. Holding their breath, the people gathered were numb, and no one dared to believe that everything had ended so quickly. Disappointed, Shu noted the weakness of the opponent, which caused a new wave of discontent. Trying to calm everyone down, the teacher said that the victory is fair and there can be no doubt. Holding back her annoyance, Rui threw out a cold warning, promising not to forget what had happened and to intervene in the youth's fate one day, her voice low but with a hint of hidden threat. Knowing that further words wouldn't change the outcome, she abruptly rose into the air and swiftly left the field, leaving behind only a slight fluctuation of energy. As the students watched, they discussed what had happened, and Xiao was puzzled by her behavior. From the side, the first elder was carefully observing the situation. Calm satisfaction could be read in her eyes. She noted the growth of the disciple and made her own conclusions. Without accepting the praise, Sister Mo acknowledged the contributions of all the mentors. Smiling, the older girl reminded him that the punishment for his earlier antics was still ahead of him. Continuing, she added that a conflict with Rui could turn into problems. Trying to calm her down, the sisters assured her that the disciple was already strong enough for battle. Keeping her face serious, the first elder added that the problem wasn't so much Rui herself as her grandfather, because the influence of the head of the Knee Sword Peak court was far more dangerous than a young girl's temper. At that moment, the second elder approached from behind the group, her footsteps quiet but steady, and her voice filled with a cold determination to deal with the situation herself. Showing no hesitation, she made it clear that she would not allow anyone to threaten their disciple, and there was a willingness in her eyes to see what she had started through to the end. Almost without pausing, she turned and walked away, as if she'd already made up her mind and wasn't going to reconsider. Realizing what this might lead to, the first elder was noticeably alarmed, as Sister Shan's interference could turn into a serious conflict, so she hurriedly ordered the others to follow her. Meanwhile, the second elder had already caught up with Rui, and without further ado, she moved into action, her punches precise and restrained, yet painful enough to overwhelm any resistance. Rui struggled to stay on her feet, trying to regain her composure, and there was genuine incomprehension in her voice as she asked why exactly she was being punished so harshly. Without showing any emotion, the mentor replied curtly and coldly that the reasons for her actions did not require explanation, as if the girl's behavior itself was already sufficient reason. Continuing to speak in the same level tone, she stressed that the position in the clan does not give the right to be self-willed and put pressure on others, especially when it comes to personal ambition. Trying to piece together what was happening, Rui gradually realized that it was all related to her conflict with Xiao, and this realization only increased the internal tension. Despite her fear and pain, she didn't give up her pride, continuing to threaten with her grandfather's name, hoping that it would stop what was happening. However, the second elder remained unperturbed, and there was an icy warning in her voice that no amount of connections would help if one went overboard. Under the pressure of her mentor's power and aura, Rui finally broke down and knelt down, her previous confidence replaced by forced submission. At that moment, an old man's voice came out of the darkness, full of anxiety and pleading, which sounded like a desire to protect her granddaughter from further punishment. Soon the speaker himself appeared, descending from the height, his movements calm but carrying the weight of the power he wielded. When she saw him, Rui looked up, and there was hope in her eyes because she knew that now she had a chance to avoid further consequences. Walking closer, the white-haired man clasped his hands in a salute, addressing the second elder with due respect. However, her reaction remained cold, and she directly asked if he really intended to interfere in matters that only concerned the elders. Unable to stand the strain, Rui abruptly stood up, trying to defend her grandfather's honor, but her words sounded more desperate than confident, especially against the background of his attempts to stop her. Soon the conversation turned into an open exchange, in which the old man reproached the mentor for excessive rigidity, while she pointed out the inadmissibility of his granddaughter's behavior. After assessing the girl's arguments, the old man slowed down his speech noticeably, finding no convincing objections, and after a short pause chose to retreat, deciding that further argument would only aggravate his situation. In an attempt to ease the tension, he promised to punish his granddaughter on his own, carefully justifying her actions. But Sister Shan remained adamant and did not want to accept such concessions. Wanting to regain his weight, the old man raised his voice and abruptly declared that perseverance would lead to consequences, and his words sounded heavy, as if he was trying to suppress the girl with pressure. With a cold smile, the girl replied that such threats would only make sense from Hua Xianfeng's mouth, and then without hesitation, she left the scene of the argument, disappearing into the dark silence. Keeping a stern look on her face, she left feeling disappointed that neither the old man's granddaughter nor her opponent had the level of strength and talent that she had hoped for. Abruptly changing his tone, the old man snapped after her, saying that he would be interested to see how long she could maintain her position without support. Turning his gaze to his granddaughter, he demanded an honest account, his voice quieter now, but there was a hint of urgency and hidden annoyance in it. When he woke up in the warm morning, he stretched lazily, enjoying the soft light and green scenery, which seemed especially peaceful after the recent events. Plunging into his thoughts, he came to the conclusion that the previous training sessions no longer give the desired effect, and it is worth looking for new conditions for the growth and strengthening of the body. Noticing the movement around him, the cultivator saw students rushing towards the tower, talking and urging each other on, hoping to get better seats inside. Hearing about the tower, the young disciple felt a genuine interest, and he already imagined the possible challenges that could await him in this mysterious place. As he got closer, he saw the majestic structure stretched up like a blade, its shape inspiring respect and a hidden threat to anyone who dared to enter. As he followed the crowd, he noticed the doors slowly opening, inviting them in, and the flow of students didn't stop, as if the tower itself was drawing them in. Moving forward, the young man found himself surrounded by many surprised faces, where anxiety mixed with excitement, and no one knew what exactly was waiting for them inside. He walked calmly along with the others, only a slight smile on his face and a confident look in his eyes as if he didn't have any doubts about what was happening. Once in the central hall, Zhao sensed an oppressive atmosphere. The faint light seemed alien, and the space itself caused an inexplicable tension. Looking around, he found out that the hall is dedicated to the 5 elements, and without much hesitation, he headed toward the fire zone, attracted by its hidden power. As he got closer, the cultivator noticed the students surrounded by water defenses, and they hurried to warn him of the deadly danger without proper preparation. Trying to stop him, they explained that the path further lies through toxic fumes, and the consequences can be irreversible even for strong practitioners. At that moment, the fire seal flashed, releasing a dense miasma, and the heat instantly filled the space, making breathing heavy and uneven. Feeling the impact, the guy realized that the fire poison destroys bones and spiritual roots, and the system immediately confirmed this with unpleasant notifications. Comparing the sensations, the youngster realized that the strength of the poison here is much higher than in the previous place, and therefore such conditions are ideal for his development. Watching him, the students were amazed because he did not try to defend himself, but calmly remained in the center of the danger zone, as if ignoring the threat. Hearing the conversations, the 2 strict girls came closer and asked the subordinates about what was happening, and the answer surprised them with its surprise. After receiving the explanation, one of them frowned because such behavior seemed reckless and caused her sincere concern. As he continued to meditate, he remained motionless, attracting the attention of everyone around him, but no one interfered, preferring to watch. As they talked, the girls recalled their first visit here, comparing their endurance and discussing the limits they had reached. Remembering Yu, they noted her outstanding talent, because even without training, she was able to withstand the impact that was not available to ordinary practitioners. While maintaining his focus, he continued to strengthen himself, gradually building up the strength of his bones and strengthening the fire spiritual root. As the intensity increased, the watching students noticed that it was holding up longer than previous records, and they sounded genuinely surprised. Hearing this, Yu became interested and asked about the young man's identity, and the answer she received described him as a brash newcomer who had already attracted the attention of the entire clan. Holding back the sudden warmth in her chest, Yu looked at him differently, her gaze softening and becoming more attentive, showing respect for his resilience and a quiet recognition of his recent victories. With a smile and a tilt of her head, the girl who resembled her, like a reflection in water, allowed herself a light joke, hinting at a sudden feeling, which caused barely noticeable embarrassment and hidden irritation. Talking in low voices, the group gradually came to the conclusion that such a high resistance of the body indicates a rare nature of power, and they may have a truly exceptional talent in front of them. With each breath filled with heat, Xiao patiently endured the pressure, feeling his body slowly rebuild, and every second in the fire brought him new grains of inner power. As the flames subsided and the space became calmer, he felt a little disappointed because the expected jump did not happen, and the result achieved seemed insufficient to him. Unwilling to accept such an outcome, he did not hesitate to step deeper into the dangerous area, deciding that retreat was impossible until the limit of his capabilities was fully reached. Watching this stubbornness, the two women exchanged glances, unsure whether to interfere now or whether it would be better to let him reveal himself even more and only then appreciate his true worth. The interior space met him with an eerie silence, where only heavy scarlet swirls swirled in the distance, like living things slowly rolling across the void. His gaze settled on the massive lion's head, with a door hidden inside and a black funnel above it that sucked in light, and the sight was both disturbing and curious. After reading the inscription on the tablet, the newcomer understood the price of entry, expressed in rare cores, and despite the impressive cost, he did not feel any doubts or regret. Remembering the recent spoils, the young man calmly decided to spend resources, because for him it was more important to develop and not accumulate wealth. Just as he was about to step inside, he felt eyes on him, and the next moment, three men with rough voices and unkind expressions called out to him. Without further explanation, they stated that there were different rules here, and each newcomer must first show respect and pay a fee to their leader. He gave them a slightly irritated glance, not expecting to encounter such an order, and chuckled inwardly at what was happening. Allowing himself a sarcastic remark, Xiao hinted at their situation, which instantly hurt the pride of one of them and provoked an outburst of aggression. A sudden movement, and the opponent was already rushing forward, swinging his arm, but the attack was too predictable and devoid of real power. Calmly holding out his palm, Xiao stopped the blow, and it was enough for the opponent to lose his balance and be thrown back. Bending over in pain, the attacker screamed loudly, his face contorted, and his confidence vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Unable to withstand the load, he collapsed to the ground, while his companion anxiously tried to understand the source of such strength in an outwardly ordinary youth. Unperturbed, Xiao remained standing where he was, waiting for her to continue, as if the situation posed no threat to him. Then their leader stepped forward, introducing himself and emphasizing his status, and then demonstrated the flaming hand technique with the obvious intention of intimidating. In response, Xiao just idly scratched his ear and asked if it was really something outstanding, which further inflamed the opponent's annoyance. Angry, Yuan took to the air, eager to show off his full strength and prove his superiority to the others. With his hands folded in an intricate pattern, he focused and went on the attack first, hoping for a quick victory. His comrades watched with delight, confident in the outcome and not doubting the strength of their leader. However, Xiao only chuckled, realizing that the wrong strategy had been chosen against him, and in his eyes what was happening was almost funny. Concentrating, he applied the first form of the Starfire cannon, channeling the force accurately and confidently. The battle instantly escalated, tension rising to the limit, and the space around them seemed to freeze in anticipation of the outcome. Seeing the technique gave Yuan a real shock. His body momentarily became unresponsive, and his confidence cracked. Xiao Xiao unleashed a torrent of energy directly at him, giving him no time to react, and the impact was devastating. The explosion of power left behind a huge crater that was a mute testament to the youth's superiority. Calmly looking at the fallen opponent, He asked if they needed more of his crystals, adding that with a weapon, the outcome would be even faster. Humiliated and broken, Yuan knelt down, begging for forgiveness and thanking her for her leniency. Not wanting to continue the conversation, the winner only waved his hand, indicating that they had better disappear as soon as possible. Wen was deeply hurt by the defeat. His pride was shattered, and he could barely contain his inner rage. Watching girls approvingly appreciated what was happening, noting the strength and character of the young man. Without wasting any time, Yu decided to go to the elder to tell him about him and suggest his candidacy. As Xiao entered, the space around him changed, and a vortex of energy seemed to close in behind him. His attention was drawn to the thin lines of light that crisscrossed the space in a complex pattern. Realizing that this was a powerful formation filled with fire poison, the young genius felt quite interested. As he slowly moved forward, he stared at the thin shining lines that crisscrossed the space in intricate patterns. And the longer he watched, the more clearly he realized that this was not just a defense, but a living formation. Listening to the sensations, the young man caught a thick admixture of fiery poison in each flow of energy. And this combination did not repel him, but on the contrary excited him, making his heart beat faster with a strange delight. With each step inside, the pressure on his body increased. But instead of fear, Zhao felt only excitement, as if the environment itself was inviting him to test the limits of his own abilities. Suddenly, the air next to him shook, and the practitioner whirled around, catching the approaching threat that had appeared so close, as if it had been lurking in space itself all along. A fiery lion burst out of the flaming vortex, its body made up of dense flames, and its open mouth let out a roar that could shake even a confident fighter. A wave of sound engulfed Xiao, knocking him off his feet, but instead of pain, he felt a strange penetration of power, as if the roar was burning through him from the inside, not destroying him, but rebuilding him. The flame touched the skin, but it didn't burn. It penetrated deeper, interacting with the bones and spiritual root, and there was a rough but valuable tempering hidden in this effect. Gritting his teeth, Xiao allowed the attack to pass through him without trying to dodge, and at that moment, his body seemed to respond, starting to greedily absorb the energy. A sharp surge of power shot through him from within, and the young man clearly felt like he was crossing the boundary, entering the first layer of Qi mode. The sensation was heavy and intoxicating at the same time. The internal flow of energy became denser, his movements became more stable, and his breath was filled with a heat that no longer pressed but obeyed his will. The system responded with a quiet notification, fixing the changes, and now every movement of the body seemed more accurate, and every thought clearer. A sense of satisfaction flared up in his chest, but with it the desire to go further grew, because what he had achieved no longer seemed like the limit. When he looked up at the fire lion, he no longer saw it as a threat, only as a source of new opportunity that should not be missed. As he gathered his strength, he felt the energy flow to his arm in a dense stream, weighing it down, making the movement slow but inescapable. Taking a step forward, he threw a punch without hesitation, infusing not only the strength, but also the confidence that was born from what he had just experienced. The fist collided with the beast's fiery body, and for a moment, space seemed to freeze before being dispersed by a wave of energy. The fire lion couldn't withstand this pressure. Its form began to collapse, breaking up into countless sparks that slowly extinguished in the air. As he watched his opponent vanish, he felt a part of that power that had already become his own remain inside him. Confidence and determination shone on his once weak disciple Xiao's face, giving him the inner confidence to win the spring trials.